So I'm like, you know what? I'm looking at my watch. I got to fly in like an hour. I'm like, you know what? Fine. Do the double secret probation thing. I got to eat and I got to go flying. I'm done. Yeah. Yeah. Double secret probation. You know, however much time later, a week or two later, we just lost a jet out in Yuma. I'm like, oh shit. And it was this kid.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Tracer Burnout. I'm Dan.
I'm Roger.
And today we are sitting down with a very special guest, Matt Whiz Buckley. How are you, sir?
Good morning. Glad to be here, guys. Looking forward to our conversation.
Outstanding. So we get started the same way with a little bit of a family backstory. So does your family have a history of service?
Not my direct family, but my grandfathers, uncles, all of them were World War II, Army, Army Air Corps, Navy. My dad's dad served on a submarine in the Pacific. But my dad had 4 kids by the time the Vietnam War was around, so he didn't have to serve in Vietnam. But so extended family, yes.
Okay. So then what, because your dad did not serve, what drew you to the service?
Well, my mom and dad, I'm one of 6 kids, typical Irish Catholic family from South Philadelphia, South Jersey. And I was raised service above self. And that we just lived in an incredible country, and it needed to be defended. And then when I was growing up on the Jersey Shore, one of my best friends who lived across the street from me, his dad was a fighter pilot in the New Jersey Air National Guard. And this guy was larger than life. He flew for the Guard and was also an Eastern Airlines pilot. He had a Trans Am, and this guy was just larger than life. And this was, I grew up. I'm going to age myself here, but I grew up in the 80s ish. It was Cold War, man, and the Soviet Union would send bombers, out of Cuba up the east coast of the U.S., and they kind of drift into our airspace to test our, scramble and reaction time. So I used to go out to Atlantic City International and sit there on the fence, as that kid watching these F-106s take off, and it was just, one of the coolest things to watch as a kid. And my dad, he and I would sit there and I'd watch, the Battle of Midway or the Sands of Iwo Jima or Pearl Harbor or
Classics.
Well,
Victory at Sea.
You're
right?
talking about the old I
Charlton
think it was like
Heston.
1976 Pearl Harbor movie, not the
not the crappy
abomination
Ben
that came out
Affleck
in the
one.
2000s.
Not Dan's hero Ben Affleck. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No. I'm talking the original Pearl Harbor. And From Here to Eternity. That's my and the bridges at Toko Ri. Just my dad. We love watching all that stuff together. So living on the beach, I was an ocean guy. I loved aviation, so just kind of a Reese's peanut butter cup. I said, you know what? I want to be a naval aviator. I want to fly fighter jets off of aircraft carriers, and I was singularly focused on that as a kid, and then through high school and college.
Now, because of your age group and everything that you've just laid out, I'm going to assume that you are a victim of the propaganda of the movie Top Gun that came out right around your coming of age. Yes.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because as I said, I knew I wanted to do this since I can remember. I used to go to air shows up at McGuire Air Force Base, and I think I watched the Blues in F4s and maybe the Thunder Chickens in T-38s. That's how old I am. So I knew what I wanted to do. So now I'm really going to age myself. I was a junior in high school when the movie Top Gun came out. I was furious. I was not happy because after that movie came out, everybody wanted to be a Navy fighter pilot. I'm like, man, I was here first. Um, so it really kicked me in the butt. I had to try even harder now that everybody and their mother wanted to fly jets for the Navy. So I escaped the Northeast, and I went to college down here in Florida, and I was a NROTC guy up at Jacksonville University. And then another stroke of bad luck hit me. I got commissioned. I graduated in 1991, and that's when I got commissioned. If we all remember 1991, wall fell down.
The riff, yeah.
Yep. The Soviet Union's gone. We're friends. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, all that type of stuff.
The peace dividend.
The peace dividend. The year 1990, we were still all enemies, and everybody can get a flight slot if you can fog a mirror. And then the next year, half. They just literally cut the amount of flight slots in half. And I'm glad I did what I did, because when I went ROTC in college, that's when the Navy started doing the whole, oh, if you want to be a fighter pilot, you need to be an engineer or a physicist, or, you need to be a brainiac. And I'm like, oh man, I'm an idiot.
Oops.
And I had a couple buddies go before me, and they were in flight school at the time. And I called them. I'm like, hey man, the ROTC folks are telling me I have to be an engineer or something. They're like, they're lying to you. I was a forestry major and at the academy, and here I am flying jets, because the majority of what they factor in at the time to what you select was your GPA. It was like 75% GPA, this much major, and this much like recommendations and stuff. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to listen to the gouge. I'm going to listen to those guys. So I went political science, poli-sci, skate on by, get to fly.
As a fellow poli-sci major, yes.
Yeah. So I had fun for 4 years in college and got great grades. And then when 91 hit and I got commissioned and they cut half the flight slots, it was miserable for some of my good friends, because they listened. They went engineering. They were miserable for 4 years. They got 2.5s, and the year before they could have gotten aviation with like a 2.5. When we got commissioned, they got driving a boat. So I super lucked out by doing what I did. Nowadays, my two boys were thinking about and stuff like that. You actually they require it. You have to be a STEM major. But I completely disagree with that. It has absolutely no bearing on being able to fly an airplane off an aircraft carrier. As a matter of fact, back in my day, I love talking like that, the guys who showed up with the engineering degrees almost washed out of flight training because they were too smart.
Overthinking it.
Yeah, the instructors were like, this is how wing works, the engine works. And they're like, well, now actually it works like
in theory,
this. The instructors are like, shut up. This is how we want you to know how this works, not what you learned in college. So
it works in reality, but does it work in theory?
That's exactly right. So I looked out in 91. I selected, aviation, and then went to primary in Pensacola, Florida. And then anything in military aviation, especially naval aviation, is a pyramid, right? You enter at the bottom of the pyramid. So we all show up at Naval Air Station Pensacola like an officer and a gentleman, and everybody wants to fly jets. Everybody saw Top Gun. Everybody wants to be a fighter pilot. Well, that ain't the way it works. The Navy's got a ton of helicopters. The Navy has a ton of fixed wing aircraft,
right? And
the Navy has a ton of jets. And in the jets at the time, we had refueling jets, we had intelligence jets, we had attack jets, and then we had fighter jets. So all the way up that pyramid, I always wanted to be number one, because you always got your choice. I had heard horror stories like, oh my God, last week, the Navy needed helicopter pilots, and all 10 guys got
the whole class.
Helicopters. Yeah. Whole class got helicopters, except the first guy, because they always let that person. I'm like, I'm going to be that dude. So I lived like the Unabomber in Milton, Florida. I had a 1-bedroom house in the middle of the woods with my golden retriever, and I studied and I wasn't going to let anything that happened to me be out of my control. So thankfully, I did really well in primary. I selected jets down in Kingsville, Texas, and then, like I just said, now that you got jets, yay! You want to fly the most elite fighter, you got to work pretty hard here. At the time, the Tomcat was still, a monster beast, but I had zero interest in flying with a dude or a lady sitting behind me. So I wanted F-18s. So I really tried hard, finished at the top of my class in advanced jets, got my wings, and I selected F-18s. Just me and another guy in my class got F-18s. And here's typical Navy, right? I'm an East Coast guy. I don't think I had ever been west of Texas. California was the land of fruits and nuts, whatever. He was from my buddy who finished number 2. He got East Coast Hornets, and I got West Coast Hornets. I'm like, why can't you just switch? And I remember calling. I went and talked to the skipper, and he's like, yeah, it's true. Just call the detailer. Maybe they'll be able to switch. And I remember calling like some office in DC, and some lieutenant reading me the riot act like, who the hell do you think you are? I'm going to lunch right now, and I don't have time to like switch your orders with that other guy. I'm like, okay, welcome to the military, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking of Top Gun, the bald guy, the commander, who's dressing him down over and over and over again, something like that.
Oh, I've had several of those in my career. Trust me.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
So real quick, stepping back, when you were in school doing ROTC, was it Navy ROTC?
Yeah. Yep. I was a political science major, and then Navy ROTC. I think it was every Thursday. I threw my uniform on, all day. You took your naval science classes and carried a rifle and learned to march and all that stuff. And then during the summer, you went on your midshipman cruises. I did an aviation cruise. I went to Beeville, Texas, and Corpus Christi, and got to fly in some airplanes and stuff like that. So you played military over the 1 day a week, and then a little bit during the summer.
How much would you say that ROTC prepared you for your future as a naval aviator?
It definitely made me a lot more rounded. I will absolutely slam academy guys and girls. That's just a different environment. The service academies, going ROTC and getting, a lot of civilian time with military sprinkled in, definitely made me a more well-rounded officer, instead of just kind of hiding at Annapolis for 4 years. So it absolutely helped. Same thing with, folks who went through officer candidate school. They did 4 years of college, 0 military, and then, went officer and a gentleman for whatever it was, 16 weeks, getting yelled at and all that type of stuff. So yeah, college definitely made me a more well-rounded officer.
As a fellow political science ROTC guy, I happen to agree. My perspective is more from the Army, of course. I do have another ROTC question, though. I know a little bit more about how the Air Force works. When you go for the Air Force Academy, basically everybody's almost like a default pilot unless they opt to do something else. Meaning it's hard to get a pilot slot from an Air Force ROTC position. And I imagine every year and cohort's going to be a little bit different. So in general, would you say that it's extremely difficult to get a flight slot from ROTC for the Navy?
Well, again, my gouge is 3 decades old. Excuse me, but we actually commissioned in front of the Naval Academy, so my lineal numbers were higher than those folks. So allegedly, we got more aviation slots than the units that commissioned later on in the cycle. Okay. They might have fixed that, but yeah, I was wherever I could figure out a way to be. I ended up doing it, but. I don't know if that's the case now, if they just say, X amount of, because I know they do it with the SEALs, like out of ROTC, we're going to have 10 SEALs. Out of the academy, it's 6 or something like that. So I know it's definitely, they have a quota system. I just don't know how it is today. I know today, in order to get aviation, I did it on my own. I had a private pilot's license, which definitely helped. Nowadays, I think they have a pre-flight type of program where they actually require you to have some civilian flight time before you.
Interesting. Go. Okay.
When you did your summer, again, still during your JRTC time or ROTC time, when you did your summer program, what kind of stuff were you doing? Like, where were you going? That sort of thing.
I started off, it was pretty funny. The ship portion of it, go see how the surface Navy works. I was at Charleston Naval Station. I was on a MSO 490, the USS Leader. This was a minesweeper, and this was a wooden ship with a canvas bridge. I mean, you didn't get more. This was like Mr. Roberts or something like that. This was a boat and we left somewhere and went down the chest wherever we went out and did stuff. I was like, wow. I remember having the second dog watch or whatever on the bridge from like 2 to 4 in the morning, and that's the first time in my life I'd ever drank coffee. I'm like falling asleep, and the crusty lieutenant, hey, get the midshipman some coffee. I'm like, this is gross. Now I'm hooked on coffee.
Likewise.
So yeah, we pulled back into port, and I think the commanding officer was like, these midshipmen really can't stay on this boat. It's like we barely have enough room for us. So we were transferred over to the USS Farian, which was a frigate in FFG. So that was my taste of surface life, and it was a misery. It was actually an aviation appreciation tour. I'm like, I have zero interest in driving or being on a boat other than landing on it. So that was
It made you appreciate the aviation aspect.
It absolutely did. So that was my surface experience as a midshipman. And then, like I said, I went to Corpus Christi, got to fly a King Air, a T-44. And then I got to fly in the back seat of an A4 at NAS Beeville, Chase Field, it was called. That closed down a long, long time ago. I think it's a prison now, which is pretty funny. So those were my midshipman summers.
Okay. Anything else about flight school?
No, it was fun, man. I mean, being a kid from New Jersey and living in Kingsville, Texas, it's pretty funny, man. Because when I pulled into Kingsville, Texas, I had a crappy apartment and went for a run. And in Texas, it's just long, straight roads for miles. You can shoot a gun and hit somebody in Arizona. And as I'm running down this long road, all these trucks are driving by and they're beeping at me. And I'm from New Jersey, so I flip them off. I'm like, hey, F
The
you
Jersey
too,
salute,
type of
yes.
thing. Until about the 5th or 6th car, when I realized they were waving. They were like doing the howdy. I'm like, I can't get any more off the road, F you too. I'm like, oh my God, these people are being nice and they're waving, right? So I was definitely a my cousin Vinny at that point in Texas, but flight school was a blast. I should mention real quick how I got my call sign though, which was before flight school. So after I got commissioned out of Jacksonville University, they said, hey, there's a wait for flight school. It's about a year. You got to find something to do. And I had heard most of the folks who didn't find something to do went to Pensacola and they became lifeguards. They're like at school's command on the side of the pool with a life ring sitting there for 12 hours a day. I'm like, I'm not doing that. So my senior year, we had driven an RV down to Key West for spring break. And this is a really funny story. So we're down. I'm your typical fraternity guy, spring break, Key West on the beach.
Making good choices. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And there's a, Naval Air Station Key West down there. They had an adversary squadron. So they had a bad guy squadron, right? They flew F-16s, they flew A4s, they flew F-5s
MiGs
for bad guy. Well, they did during my spring break because I was on the beach. And all of a sudden, I know all the Navy jets, obviously. All of a sudden, a MiG-23 rips by. And I'm like, that's a MiG. That was a MiG-23. And my fraternity brothers are like, all right, man, you're drunk. Shut up. Here's another beer. Well, about a day or two later, breaking news, a MiG-23 from Cuba defected and landed at Naval Air Station Key West. And the pilot, Major Orestes Lorenzo, requested asylum. Why do I bring that up? Well, a couple things, because that's the place I earned my call sign, Whiz. And more importantly, you want to talk about a God moment. Over 3 decades later, I am best friends with Orestes Lorenzo. He owns his own L-39. I own my own L-39.
Awesome.
He launches out of Leesburg, Florida. I launch out of Pompano, Florida. And we meet in the middle of the state and we dogfight. So you got a guy who defected in a MiG, and you got an old retired F-18 guy who can buy their own fighter jets and dogfight each other over Florida. If that ain't an all-American story, I've never heard it.
That's awesome.
So talk about a moment of history. Let me tell you about Orestes real quick. Didn't speak a lick of English. So that morning, so he was married and had 2 kids at the time. I think he was the XO of the base where these MiGs were. So he knew the air defenses, he knew everything, right? So he took off, got down to like 10 feet, over the water and races to Key West. And to hear him tell the story, he's like, I pop up as I get close to Key West and I'm expected to be immediately shot down. They were just going to kill me immediately. And he's like, nothing happened. And then I kind of circle the airport waiting, for something. Nothing happens. I land, get to the end of the runway and pop my canopy, get out. And there's like a, private or a seaman mowing the grass. And he's like, in Spanish, like surrenders to this guy. And the kid's like, hang on.
That was not on his bingo card that morning.
It was not. And this is an incredible story. So, the FBI, CIA come down, welcome to America. They give him a little bit of money. He got to meet Ronald Reagan. He got to meet George Bush, Margaret Thatcher, the Pope, because all of these people demanded that Castro release his wife and kids,
his family,
for humanitarian reasons. Year and a half. Absolutely not. All these people, Pope, please release. Nope. And his wife and kids were tailed every day with Cuban agents, right? So somehow Orestes got a letter to his wife. This ain't Al Gore hadn't invented the internet yet. So this is literally a letter through
I see what you did there.
Agents. And, it said, I want you to be at this point on this date and at this time. Orestes drives down to Marathon Key, right in the middle of the Keys. And he finds a Cessna 310, a twin engine Cessna. Took a little bit of his CIA money and got checked out in that plane in like an hour with some old guy. Like, here's how you fly it. You want to buy it? Yeah, here's the cash. He takes off just before sunset from Marathon Key, Florida, gets airborne in it and flies at about 5 feet above the water, all the way down to Cuba. And he goes to land on this dirt road in northern Cuba. And to hear him tell it, he's like, Whiz, I start to come into land, and there's an army truck driving right down the road where I'm supposed to land. He's like, so I assume they got the letter. My wife and kids are dead. It's over with. I might as well. I'll go join them. To hear years later what actually happened, this was just a random army truck full of dudes driving by. And when they saw this airplane land, and they had never seen a small airplane, they thought it was like Castro, and they're all like standing at attention saluting. So he flies past this truck, lands on the road, and he's sitting there with the engines turning like, well, I guess they get the letter. Out of the woods come his wife and kids. They jump in the back of this airplane, and he immediately gets airborne. Now it's dark. It's night. He flies back also at 5 feet above the water and lands in Marathon Key. You can see in his book the pictures of the windscreen of his Cessna had salt buildup in entire. He couldn't see. It was night, and he couldn't see out of the front window, and rescued his wife and kids. It's one of the most incredible stories. I think the book is called Wings of the Morning. He's one of the greatest Americans. He built a massive company here in Florida. He builds all the asphalt for all the SpaceX pads and everything.
Oh, cool.
So he literally lived the American dream. He's one of the greatest guys.
Love it.
So that happened. I saw him for the first time in spring break when he defected, and then he and I fly fighter jets together 30 years later. But I also, when they said, hey, find something to do for the next year, because flight school's got a bubble, I called down to VF-45, the adversary squadron. And I said, hey, can you take a stash ensign for a year? And they're like, yeah, man, come on down. It was without a doubt it was the worst idea to get me started in my military career, because this squadron was just out of control. They flew, F-16s, F-5s, A-4s. I got about 50, maybe 70 hours in the backseat of these jets. 6 months later, I'm essentially flying these things. I haven't even gone to flight school yet. And these are all second tour guys. They had all, these are elite Top Gun grads. The best duty in the Navy was getting assigned to Key West in this adversary squadron. So I'm a little young ensign in this squadron. And that's where I earned my call sign, because one night, we were all out. And since this is a family show, let's just say I earned my call sign in Key West, Whiz, and it has nothing to do with intelligence. So I'll leave it at that. But I went to when I went to flight school. Not only did I have my little civilian time, I had about 70 hours in tactical jets. So it provided me a little bit of a leg up. So when I got my wings, one of the best days of my life, my mom and dad, my beautiful girlfriend at the time, who became my beautiful bride, and my brother and my sisters were there, pinned the wings of gold on my chest, and I hopped in the car with my girlfriend and my two dogs, and we drove from Kingsville Naval Air Station all the way out to Lemoore, California. And all they did was change the signs. Lemoore, California looked exactly like Kingsville, just an absolute
Desolation.
backwater, desolation. I mean, we don't put master jet bases or training bases in downtown New York City, right? We put these things out in the middle of nowhere. And Lemoore, if you throw a dart in the middle of California in the armpit, in between Sacramento and Bakersfield, is cows, cotton, pesticides, and hornets. So I went out, and
Hornets, the
that was my
insect.
first. Oh, it's awful. And then for a month or 2 months out of the year, the fog is, you can't
Yep.
see the hood of your car.
Yep.
Lemoore gets fogged in. Above it at 200 feet, it's a beautiful day. Below it, you can't.
It just settles
you
in.
can't see the. Yeah. So that was my first duty station, was Naval Air Station Lemoore in California.
When you were in flight school, or going into flight school rather, did you have an idea of like what you wanted to fly, or what it would be preferred for you to fly?
Oh yeah, I knew it was the F-18. I mean, like I said, the Tomcat was still,
the workhorse.
The movie, and I wear my polo shirt under my flight suit with my Ray-Bans type of guys. I had zero interest in that. I wanted to be a FA-18, fighter and attack. The Tomcat was initially designed to stop the Russian horde from coming and attacking the battle group, right? High altitude, lobbing a bunch of missiles downrange, protect the carrier. I'm like, I want to do both those things. I want to be able to lob missiles downrange and shoot stuff down, but I want to blow stuff up too. So the F-18 was the elite premier fighter at the time. Like we talked about before, the Navy's had a lot of jets. They had the S-3, which was anti-submarine, and then also a tanker. They had the A-6, the Intruder, which was an attack jet. They had a jammer, the Prowler. Had 4 people in that thing, man. That was like the family truckster.
We used the Prowlers in Afghanistan for electronic warfare. So, yeah.
Yeah, I had zero interest. No offense to anybody. I had zero interest in flying with somebody else. I wanted to be a single seat fighter pilot. So I always knew throughout flight school I wanted to fly F-18s. That's all I cared about. So I graduated first with my other buddy who got Hornets, and yeah.
Was there a specific aircraft that you dreaded being selected for?
Prowlers, S-3s. I mean, I guess the A-6 and the Tomcat would have been fine because they're very tactical. I don't know if to offend the Prowler guys too much, but that was semi-tactical, right? They're jamming, and they could also shoot HARM, high-speed anti-radiation missiles. But in S-3, the Soviet Union failed, man. We ain't out. This isn't the hunt for Red October days anymore. So the S-3 kind of transitioned from being an anti-submarine plane to aerial refueling. They just put a bunch of gas on it, and that's what we got gas from. So it was Hornet, Tomcat, A-6, everything else.
Okay.
One ping.
Yeah, exactly.
I couldn't resist. I'm sorry. Okay. All right. So you show up to your first duty station with your girlfriend in tow. How soon after do y'all get married?
Very soon after reporting to Lemoore, because the same office that I called, like, hey, can you and my buddy switch? I'd prefer to go East Coast. He's from California. No. They also told me, hey, this is when you're going to SEER school. Well, the night after I got winged in Kingsville, Texas, my family was there. Susie's parents came to my winging. They all came because they all knew, she didn't, that the next night when we drove up to San Antonio to go on the river walk for a nice dinner, I was going to ask Susie to marry me. So we got engaged on the Riverwalk the next night after I got my wings, started doing all the wedding planning. And then that's when it's like, oh my God, SEER school is literally the weekend before the wedding. Can you maybe have them move that? Same office, are you insane? Don't ever call us again.
Ever again.
I'm like, so I went to SEER school, as you all know, great experience, right? Getting beat up for a week and starving and all that type of stuff. And got at it, towards the end of SEER school when they do the whole, oh, you're the worst and we're keeping you here. We're not releasing you.
It's a tradition. They say that at every SEER school. Yes.
I get up and I went to one of the instructors. I'm like, I'm done. I'm leaving. I'm on a plane tomorrow I need to get married. He's like, sit down. It's almost over. I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, no.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
And then, oh, no. Flag pops up and, it's funny because at the debrief in the base theater down at North Island, the flight doc or whoever psychologist is like, you're going to experience some highs and lows, in the next couple of weeks and, a lot of weird things. I'm like, I'm getting married in a couple days. And they all look at each other and they're like, oh, good luck. So I remember getting off the airplane down here in South Florida, my wife looking at me like, oh my God, you look awful. So, I look like a prisoner of war. So I look like the guy from Talking Heads, same as it ever was in his suit. When I look at my wedding pictures and my dress whites, I mean, they barely fit. So yeah, so we got.
How long was the course and where was it?
SEER school was down I did the one on the West Coast, just, in the mountains of, whatever it was called. Not Winter Park, whatever it was. I did the East Coast or the West Coast one.
So all of your schooling leading up to your first assignment is complete. Now you're finally at your, I guess, your first real unit. Is a good enough way to put it?
Well, technically at this point, the schooling just started, right? Because in the training command, you're flying orange and white airplanes. Thankfully, I got to fly the A4. John McCain, Vietnam. The A4 was just an incredible airplane. I wore it. It fit like a glove, man. I mean, what a great airplane. But those are all training airplanes. So after you get your wings, you have to go to what's called the RAG. You actually have to go to a squadron that teaches you how to fly the plane you got assigned, because all the planes you flew were trainers. Now you have to learn how to fly the operational jet. So going to the RAG in Lemoore is you're at the bottom again. You're a brand new guy learning to fly the F-18, and now going from a trainer to this is a legit.
It's a rocket.
The aircraft. Yeah. It's a fighter jet. You got it. It's a fighter and an attack jet. We're going to train you how to be a single seat aviator. So, man, this was Top Gun was the most intense training. But after being in the training command and just kind of learning basics, going to the F-18 RAG is the most toughest schooling I had done up until that point. Plus, it's the first time you land at night aboard an aircraft carrier. When you're in the training command, you do day. I landed on, I think I shaved this morning with both of these boats. I landed on the America and the Saratoga, which neither of them exist anymore. But those were all day. The first time you go to the boat at night is in the RAG in your aircraft that you've been designated. And day landings, sport of kings. Night landings, absolutely terrifying. I'd throw my own mother in the cockpit. It's as dark as the inside of a basketball, and it's terror. It's just It's bad. So as a young kid, you're learning to fly and fight the Hornet, and you got to go to the boat at night. So the RAG, when I showed up in Lemoore, was probably 8 months ish, 8 months to a year of training. Once you get done with the RAG, now you get assigned to your
operational
first
work.
fleet squadron. So the RAG, yeah, exactly. So the RAG for me was VFA 125, the Rough Raiders. And then I got assigned across the street to my first fleet squadron, which was VFA 94, the Mighty Shrikes. And I actually requested that squadron because, I wanted to be number one. I finished, close to the top, if not at the top of my RAG class. So, they kind of gave you your choice of squadrons. And I said, who's going next, right? Who's deploying, who's going on deployment the soonest? And they said, well, VFA 94, they're in workups right now. If you don't know what workups is, workups gets you ready to go on deployment. You're actually gone more during workups than you are in a 6-month cruise. Workups for the Navy is, all right, you're off the coast of San Diego for a month doing boat stuff. All right, now you go up to Fallon, Nevada for a month and a half to drop bombs. Now you forgot how to land back at the boat. Now back up, you're gone so much during workups. So I said, you know what? I want to go to the next squadron that's deploying. And it was the Mighty Shrikes.
How each one of those workup events, how long is that? Like, what's the duration? Is it like 2 weeks here, go home for a week, and then 3 weeks over here, go home for a week?
It's all of that. It just depends. Month and a half in Fallon. It depends on what it is. There's SFARP, Strike Fighter Readiness Program. There's Comp2X, because remember, the aircraft carrier is part of a battle group. So while we're doing all our aviation stuff, the boat drivers need to do all their cool stuff. So we got to be aboard for that. So there's various stuff. The air wing's doing this, the boat's doing this. Now the air wing and the boat are doing stuff together. So it's like a building block approach, So I don't even remember, excuse me, how long each one of those things was. It just that's a faded memory at this point.
Okay. Well, before we go on from there, let's take a little step back. The landing on an aircraft carrier. Obviously, you land successfully, good to go because you're alive, right? But what are some other parts of that evaluation, both for day and for night?
Well, it's the approach, right? It's everything. So you don't get near an aircraft carrier until you do hundreds of practice landings at the field. So at every naval air station, there's a aircraft carrier painted on the runway.
Oh, okay.
And also to the left side of the runway is the ball, the lens, the landing system that we use at the ship. So you go out and you are in the pattern and you do hundreds of approaches. And the LSO, the landing signal officer, is sitting at the end of the runway. And they grade every landing. And we do this at the field because it creates muscle memory.
Muscle memory,
I'm a beam the landing area, start my turn. 28 to 30 degrees angle of bank, 200 to 300 feet per minute descent. At the 90 degrees out, I should be at 450 feet, look out to the runway, increase my angle. It is literally that. Hundreds and hundreds of times. Muscle memory.
Yeah.
And they do this because, the first time off of Key West, we flew out as students. I'm like, oh my God, that's a boat. And I have to land on it.
Yeah.
It really didn't hit it, right? You're landing hundreds of times at an air station in Texas. When you are over water and there's nothing but water, and then you see this little speck, you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm about to do this. So when you come into the break for the first time, and then you roll wings level behind a ship, all of that muscle memory is supposed to kick in.
Right.
But man, for me, when I rolled behind this boat, all I saw was a massive aircraft carrier, awake, smoke coming out of the boat, jets on the flight deck. I'm like, oh my God. And then I kind of, smacked myself in the face and said, dude, wake up. Muscle memory kicked in, meatball, lineup, angle of attack, boom, boom. And you land full power in case you miss. And all of a sudden they're taxiing you right up to the catapult to get shot. So you don't even have time for anything to compute before you're on the catapult, salute, and then boom. I mean, the first catapult launch was insanity.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
you're going from 0 to 200 miles an hour in a second and a half.
That's
So
wild.
boom, now you're airborne and you're coming around for your next landing. So it's pretty incredible. That what was I, a 23-year-old kid from South Jersey landing aboard an aircraft carrier. It was a very surreal moment.
And I mean, you have to account for the swell as well. And again, we're two old Army guys, so we say stuff as if we know what we're talking about. But having to factor in all of those physics, and in addition to that, your platform is moving. That's wild.
Yeah, it's the deck is pitching, the ships and the landing area. If you've seen an aircraft carrier, it's angled, right? There's the bow, there's the landing area. It's like a V, so it's kind of crabbing. Like the landing area is moving sideways, so you always got to make a little right wing down to chase the boat. So yeah, it is not. It's definitely interesting, but yeah, being a young kid doing this was just a very surreal moment. And then those were slower jets. And then when I went to the rag and I'm landing aboard the boat in the Hornet, man, that bigger airplane, a lot more power, and very surreal. And then your first landings at night in the Hornet were just absolutely terrifying. At least in the Hornet, in the rag, the simulators they're not like they are today. I mean, the fidelity of simulators today with AI, and I mean, you join up on a guy today in a simulator, he'll take his mask on and look at you, and you can see the guy's mustache. I mean, it's just insane. But back in the day, we had some visual simulators where we could practice landing aboard the boat at night and stuff like that. It's not like today.
Yeah, I got a lot of training on a simulator to land on an aircraft carrier playing the Top Gun Nintendo game. And I got to tell you, man, that is one of the hardest video games I've ever played, and landing was death every single time. So,
well, it's pretty realistic. Well, the death every time isn't too realistic, but yeah. Yeah.
okay, so your first should we say squadron? Your first squadron. You're getting lots of stick time. So what's that like being at the bottom of the food chain again?
Well, so it sucks, right? Because when you show up to your squadron, you got to fly with the skipper, right? The skipper puts you on his wing for about a month just to make sure you're not the village idiot, right? So now you're back at the bottom of the heap again. You're a brand new guy in a squadron with crusty lieutenants and this and that. But my first fleet squadron didn't start too well, because when I walked across the street, I think literally when I was like crossing the street, the Shrikes, we were in CAG 11, Carrier Air Group 11, Air Wing, and they were out on the Lincoln doing workups, one of their set of workups. And literally, as I was checking in to the mighty Shrikes, Kara Holtgreen, the first female F-14 Tomcat pilot who was in our sister squadron, had crashed. I think it was that day when I was crossing the street, because I checked into my squadron. There was like a duty guy, like, well, I'm like, where's everybody? They're like, oh, they're on the boat. I'm like, oh, okay. And then later that night, I heard that she had crashed trying to land aboard the Lincoln. So that was my welcome to your fleet squadron. We just had a mishap, which was pretty incredible. And that sadly set the tone for my first fleet tour. During those workups in CAG 11, we lost eight aircrew in mishaps. So we lost Kara Holtgreen in the Tomcat. Then we had a Prowler crash. And as we talked about earlier, there's 4 dudes or ladies in a Prowler. And this young kid flying the Prowler, he was fighting, which was stupid. 2 Prowlers were going to go out and do a little, dog fighting, which is, they don't do this anymore because of this stupidity. This young Lieutenant JG, who was flying the mishap Prowler, they come into the merge and he pulls some G's and he's out. The other three chuckleheads are like looking out, looking for the other prowler, and they're having fun as the prowler is in a descending turn, nose down towards the Pacific. I guess at the last instant, the right front seater, he was a lieutenant commander, a guy I knew, realized that kid was out and initiated ejection. That's like a popcorn thing, man. The sequence of jets, 3 dudes gone. So there's 4. Then this one, also in VF 213, the Black Lions, this one made national news. They took a Tomcat on a cross country. If you need to get some flight time, it's a good deal, right? Let me grab a jet and go see my folks or something like that. Well, Stacy Bates, the pilot, a friend of mine, took a Tomcat to Nashville to hang out with his folks for the weekend. Sunday, when he's leaving to go home, mom and dad and friends and family are out at the airport. Low overcast. He and Hob, his backseater, Tomcat, 2 folks in this, obviously. I didn't know the backseater as well as I knew the pilot. They did what's called a low transition. So they got airborne in their Tomcat, pushed the nose over to stay in ground effect, right? That cushion of air between the jet and the runway. They suck the landing gear up and the flaps up, and they accelerate. They're hauling ass to the end of the runway. They get to the end of the runway, pull straight up to do a cool looking takeoff. Well, as soon as they pull straight up, they're in the clouds. And apparently, Stacy got disoriented because he tried to level off. So now he's on instruments, right? So he goes to level off. And instead of leveling off and staying level, he's going full nose down. He pops out of the clouds at about 1,000 feet, puts about 11 G's on the airplane, which probably passes both of them out.
Right.
And he pancakes the jet into a condo. And I think he killed, I forget how many, I should know, 4 people in a condo or something like that. So they're dead. Those 2 guys are dead. And then they killed people on the ground. Then we lost a Hornet up in Fallon. They were doing a night strike. It's dark up in Fallon. It's mountains. It's awful conditions. You got night vision goggles, which are like looking through toilet paper straws. And you can see it on the recording. It's called the tax range. Everybody carries a pod so you can, see everything on the screen. This guy just flies and impacts the bottom of his lead, the flight lead's F-18. He's killed, and then my buddy Max ejects, and he's rescued. That's 7. The last mishap was a night catapult shot off the Lincoln. K9. I had dinner with K9. Glennon Kiergsmeister-Steen. K and 9 letters. K9. I had dinner with K9. He walked out to the jet. Night catapult shot off the Lincoln, immediately straight into the water. It's a flight control failure. The jet.
That's a mechanical error.
One of the, there's 2 angle of attack probes sticking out of the nose. And the right side of the jet is where our fuel probe comes out for us to go get gas. So the last time this jet flew, it's called a basket slap. The basket's flying around. You have to stab it, right? And sometimes if you miss, it'll bang against the side of the jet. Apparently, the basket hit one of the angle of attack probes. Landed safely, obviously. But the next time it flew, we do a hands-off cat shot, meaning your left hand's on the throttle, full power. Your right hand, we call it the towel rack. You reach up and grab the towel rack. You don't grab the stick. You program in a set trim to the flight control computer, and as soon as you get weight off wheels, the jet captures the trim you set in. Then you can grab the stick, right? So as soon as this jet got weight off wheels, it got to the end of the catapult stroke and said, I'm flying. The flight control computer said, holy crap, we're going to rotate full nose up. We can't do that. And it rotated full nose down.
Oh, geez.
So Kanon doesn't even know he's dead right now. He was
dead and didn't even know it. Ugh, that's awful.
Gone. 8. We haven't even turned west to go to Iraq yet. and we've lost 8 naval aviators and air crew.
This is mid 90s, late 90s.
This is the mid 90s,
Yeah.
man. Carrier Air Wing 11.
Yeah. Okay.
We were the first air wing with females on, obviously Carrie Lorenz. This was national news, man. The first female fighter pilot, dies. And well, did they rush her through training in 60 minutes? And so after the 8th mishap and death, for the first time in history that I knew of in naval aviation, an air wing was ordered to stand down.
Grounded. Yeah.
We pulled into port. We pulled into San Diego, and all the air crew, we're at the base theater in Miramar, and we had an operational stand down. We went back to Lemoore. We didn't fly. We had to talk to flight docs and psychologists to, your typical knee jerk reaction. As I'm getting interviewed, like, is everything okay? I'm like, yeah, I want to be flying. Having us not fly, kind of, you're taking us out of, I get it, but each one of those mishaps had a cause, right? K9, it was a mechanical issue. It wasn't his fault. The Nashville low transition was pilot error and complete stupidity, right? So that was tough. That was my first fleet tour, and we hadn't even went west. So when we went west, got over and did Operation Southern Watch. I did no fly zone missions. So I have a couple air medals on my wall here that I'm proud of, but I'm kind of embarrassed about, because even though they were called combat sorties, they were a complete joke. On some of these missions, I'm writing letters to my wife, or I'm doing my ground job, airborne, because it's so boring in enforcing this no-fly zone over southern Iraq. The scariest part of my combat missions was landing back aboard the ship, low on fuel or a pitching deck at night. So I did a cruise on the Abraham Lincoln to Iraq. We got back, and then months later, we did what is called RIMPAC. It's a big exercise.
Real quick, your time there in Southern Watch, do you think that you guys got that mission after the stand down because of the issues that the air wing had had?
No. I mean, this was during the mid 90s. Bill Clinton was the commander in chief, and the whole you got to get shot at, in order to shoot back type of thing. There was ONW, Operation Northern Watch, and there was OSW, Operation Southern Watch. So it was the time when Saddam was maybe trying to be good. I mean, I just missed some shooting. I think they were shooting before. And then, right, of course, we left the Gulf, and whoever came in, the Vinson, Operation Desert Fox. I'm like, man, we just missed that, So it depended on when you were there, what Saddam was doing. Yeah. Matter of fact, on my first cruise on Lincoln, which sucked, my wife bought plane tickets to Australia. All the wives are like, we'll meet you in Australia when you leave the Gulf. We were going to pull out of the Gulf, go down to Perth, over to Hobart, and then back to Hawaii and home. I'll never forget this, man. At the 5-month point in cruise, or whenever it was, I'll never forget this. Good morning, Abraham Lincoln. This is the captain. We're not going to Australia. That is all. And you could physically feel the ship sink like 20 feet, because I forget what happened. I could look in my journal. I forget Saddam was doing something, and they said, well, yeah, we're pulling that port. You guys are extended a month. I mean, it was a night. I mean, my mother-in-law wrote the U.S. senator in Florida, because the airlines weren't going to give the wives, credit for their tickets and all sorts of stuff like that. But
the airlines.
So that sucked. Yeah, it was, so first cruise, didn't get to go to Australia, got home. We did a RIMPAC, which was a mini cruise. It was a 2.5-3-month cruise.
It's a long float. Yeah. I've done a RIMPAC. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I'm talking about. So it was a mini cruise in the middle of my 2 cruises. And it's funny because I bring this up because on my 3rd wedding anniversary in beautiful base housing in Lemoore, concrete building, my beautiful bride, nice dinner, and we're sitting there in the candlelight. She's like, I'm like, hey, 3 years, happy anniversary. She's like, do you know how long we've actually been together in this 3 years? I'm like, oh man, that's not a good. I think it was 3 months or something like that.
Yeah, that's not a good way to start a conversation.
Not a good dinner. And then I think I failed the next night because we went out to this movie theater, in Hanford, this little one stoplight town to go to the movies. And we parked a car and we're walking down this little street to go to the movies. I'm like, my God, this place sucks. Who would live there? She's like, I do. I'm like, oh boy. I think I was home for the weekend to get my laundry
Well,
done.
gotta go.
I was gone, type of thing. Yeah. Have fun. So yeah, we did a rim pack. This is funny. This was national news. It's not funny, but I guess it is funny. This was national news too. We're on rim pack. Well, let me start with the sad part of rim pack. We're on the Kitty Hawk now. Our air wing moved over to the USS Kitty Hawk. Morning, Kitty Hawk. I'm sad to report the Chief of Naval Operations has killed himself. This was an Admiral Borda. Some reporter, kind of sounds like today, some reporter was going after him for maybe wearing a device he didn't earn, which in actuality he actually did earn, and it was a paperwork error. But this reporter was threatening to out him, and he went to his home at the Naval Observatory, wrote a note to his wife, and then wrote a note to his sailors and went in the yard and put a bullet in his chest. So that was interesting, being on RIMPAC, to hear the CNO killed himself. But there was two battle groups. We were fighting each other. It was, what was it? The Indy or no, the Midway? I forget the other boat we were fighting. It was red versus blue, whatever. I was on the Kitty Hawk and our battle group was down here, but the other battle group, check out what happened. There was an A6 from that battle group, that air wing, who was going to be doing a Whiz shoot. So this A6 launches and has a really, really, really long cable with a big banner on the end of it. And they were going to fly next to a Japanese destroyer. And the Japanese destroyer was going to do a live shoot with their Whiz, right? So this A6 flies by the destroyer or whatever it is, and the Whiz locks up the banner, shoots that off immediately. It was in auto. I don't know. I don't speak Whiz, but the way it was explained to us was like, well, it was left in auto by mistake. So as soon as that target was destroyed, it looked for the next one. And it went right up to the A6 and shot down the A6. So
you had
here
one
we
job.
are off of Pearl Harbor.
Man.
Here we are off Pearl Harbor, and the Japanese shot us down again, type of thing. So the A6 guys,
you can't make this stuff up, right?
And nope, and they got rescued by the crew. That shot them down. So that was, yeah, exactly. So that was an interesting rim pack. We had an A6
it was so
shot
realistic.
down by yeah. So getting back from RIMPAC, then we did my second cruise on Kitty Hawk. So same type of thing. It was out to Iraq, Operation Southern Watch, boring, quote, combat sorties. So it was, it was great. I got 2 cruises and a RIMPAC, got a lot of landings, got, no fly zone missions and all that stuff. I also got to be an LSO, a landing signal officer. So when I wasn't flying, I was standing on the back of the boat up on the platform, helping my fellow aviators, land aboard the ship. So that was cool, getting to be an LSO and all that stuff. So it was fun. I mean, it was obviously a lot of trauma, a lot of horror, but it was, obviously 26, 27-year-old kid from South Jersey getting to do something like that. It was pretty cool. Some of the 2 coolest things were my dad, got to do a Tiger cruise. My dad flew out to Hawaii. He met the aircraft carrier in Hawaii, and he got to cruise back from Hawaii to San Francisco. And then my second cruise on Kitty Hawk, my mother came out and got to cruise from Hawaii to San Diego on the ship. So it was pretty cool to have my parents come out on different cruises. Now, as you get towards the end of your fleet tour, right? It's called sea duty. You're on sea duty. you start filling out your dream sheet for what you want to do for shore duty, right? So there's a bunch of stuff you can do for shore duty. You can go be an instructor pilot. You can go to Top Gun. You can you can go back and be an instructor in the training command. You can do all sorts of stuff on what's called shore duty. So sea duty was 3 years, and then your shore duty would be 3 years. So I knew, I tried to do like an exchange tour, flying F-16s with the Air Force, but I think like 50 dudes were applying, for one slot. Because I had dreams of like, hey, maybe, get some F-16 time and then, go fly for the New Jersey Air Guard and go home type of thing. But since that sounded like it was 50 dudes trying for this thing, I wanted to do an exchange tour with the Marine F-18 squadron, training squadron. So at the time, the Navy had 2 F-18 training squadrons, one in Cecil Field, now Norfolk or Oceana, and then the one up in Lemoore. Well, the Marines kind of had their own one, and it was down in, now I'm really old, El Toro, Marine Corps Air Station El Toro, down in Orange County. But Navy and Marine pilots went through all the rags. It wasn't just like, hey, if you're a Marine, you just go to this rag. Everybody went to everything, but the Marines had their own kind of, we're going to call this one ours. And it was called VMFAT 101. So it was pretty cool, man, because I got selected to go be a instructor pilot in the F-18 with the Marines. So my beautiful bride and I packed up and put Lemoore Naval Air Station in the rearview mirror and drove down to Orange County, man, which was just some good living. So I was in El Toro for about a year as an instructor pilot. I was also an LSO in the training squadron. So that was really cool. I got to be one of the guys that taught young Marine and Navy aviators how to land the Hornet aboard the boat during the day and the first time at night. So that was awesome. But around that time, this was...
Before we move on to that, let's go ahead and take a break real quick.
Sounds good. You bet.
Okay, we have finished RimPack, and you are getting your shore time. So what comes next?
Yeah, so great year of flying down at Marine Corps Air Station El Toro, and then El Toro got closed due to BRAC, Base Realignment Commission, right? BRAC. So, I mean, that was some juicy real estate in Orange County, right? A Marine Corps Air Station in beautiful Orange County. So that closed, and our squadron moved down to Miramar, which was even better duty. During the it was cool. I got housing like early in Miramar, and there was a Marine squadron called VMFA 323, the Snakes. They were one of the Marine F-18 boat squadrons, and they didn't have an LSO at the time, or maybe they had one, or no, they didn't. He had just left. They didn't have an LSO, so they had actually called up to the Marine rag and said, "Hey, you got any?" And they're like, "Hey, man, Whiz just got housing down there, so a little bit of a Reese's peanut butter cup." I went TAD, TDY, whatever you guys call it, TAD to the Snakes for about 3 months. So I got to hang out with this Marine squadron. We went out to the Constellation. They were on the Connie doing workups. So I hung out with them for 3 months of their workups as a rent in LSO. And then ultimately the sharpshooters moved down from El Toro to Miramar. And that was great living. More mishaps down there. There was a mishap that I still carry with me, but I don't. I healed that as part of my psychedelic assisted therapy with the foundation. But let me tell you real quick. There was a kid, listen to me talk as an old guy, but he was a Marine captain. He was just not good. The guy should have been flying helicopters or maybe C-130s. He should not have been in Hornets. But anyway, he wasn't doing good. It's called down, an F. If you get an F on a flight, it's called a down. You know what? You're down type of thing. So he had gotten multiple downs, and we had to convene HFB, I think was called, Human Factors Board. So this kid was just not doing good. And I got picked to be on the board because I was running what was called the CQ phase, carrier qualification. So before any of these kids left the rag to go to the fleet, they had to get past me. They had to land the Hornet aboard the boat, which was interesting at the time because some of these Marines knew they were actually going to be going to 2-seat F-18D squadrons that aren't boat squadrons,
Right.
but they were still sending them to the boat. I think they stopped that maybe, because of this. But anyway, so I had to be on this HFB because the next phase this kid was going to was CQ. So 5 of us, I mean, the Marine OPSO chaired this board, and, we're all like, we all met, and, my vote was to boot him. I'm like, I've flown with the kid. He's got a 150 knot brain in a 500 knot jet. The kid sucks. And I remember, the OPSO's like, Whiz, the skipper, he's going to want a unanimous, type of thing. I'm like, fellas, he's just not good. And they said, well, what? So they come up with this double secret probation, right? They're like, well, here's what we'll do. Here's what we'll do is he'll fly in a 2-seat Hornet, right? He'll watch the instructor fly the hop from the trunk, and then they'll land out in Yuma, and then they'll swap seats, and he'll go out and do it. And I'm like, hey, that doesn't sound cheap, and that just doesn't sound. I mean, why? Well, that's what we'll do.
Yeah.
Whiz, the Marine needs Hornet pilots right now. I'm like,
and is this sunk cost fallacy where we've spent this much time, money, and effort into training somebody, so we don't want to lose them, and so it's compromising our judgment.
Well, guess what happens? So, and this is why we don't do this, and this is in my book. So I'm like, you know what? I'm looking at my watch. I got to fly in like an hour. I'm like, you know what? Fine. Do the double secret probation thing. I got to eat and I got to go flying. I'm done. Yeah. Double secret probation. However much time later, a week or two later, we just lost a jet out in Yuma. I'm like, oh shit. And it was this kid. So they're doing their double secret probation. He's in the back seat. One of my good friends, Chili, is the instructor pilot. He's in the front seat. They go out and do the mission. They're battling F5s out of Yuma. They land in Yuma, they debrief, and they switch seats. So now Chili's in the trunk, and Captain Miguel Ivora is in the front seat, I think his name was. So they get out, they get airborne, and they're fighting the F5s. And to hear Chili tell it, he's like, he was doing okay. And, as we're leaving this fight, an F5 kind of swings our wing line. And he's like, man, but we're hauling, they ain't going to catch us. The move was to keep going straight. And he's like, I saw that kid's head, look at the F5. And he's like, before I could tell him, don't turn, just keep going. This kid, and they're at low altitude, right? They're, 6, 7, 8,000 feet, hauling the mail. He pulls and, essentially departs the airplane. I mean, he just departs the jet. And Chili's like, man, we're out of control. And the F-18 procedures said, if you're out of control below 6,000 feet AGL, above ground level, eject.
Don't even think about
Chili's
it.
like, man. Yeah. Chili's like, man, I grabbed the controls. We're talking back and forth. And we're going right through 6,000 feet. So I'm like, let's get out of here. Boom. So in the F-18, anybody pulls, the backseater is going to go first, because if the front seater goes first, he'll burn the backseater. So Chili goes, wakes up in his parachute, looks up, he's got a good chute, looks at the Hornet, still kind of doing this, falling leaf, boom, big dust in the desert, big fireball. Doesn't see another parachute. So it turns out the kid didn't eject and died. And I'll never forget being at the base chapel at Miramar, seeing his young bride and his kid. I still, I have this picture with him sitting on the F-18 holding his newborn. So the investigation revealed that he was communicating. Chili and him were talking. It's not like when Chili ejected, he mysteriously died. They believe, sat there in his ejection seat waiting for his seat to fire, right? In the F-18, if you pull the back seat, there's a bunch of gas that goes through a tube, through a Fetzer valve, whatever it's called, and is supposed to ignite the motor of the front seat. and it would go. So allegedly, this kid sat in his seat waiting for it to fire. And that's what killed him ultimately. Guess what? As instructor, we were all mortified. Why? Because they tested the seat. If he had pulled his own ejection handle, he'd be alive. Instead, he just decided to sit there and wait for the seat to fire. Man, I would have pulled that handle. If that didn't work, I would have stuck my hands out and started flapping my arms to try and fly. I mean, absolute stupidity. So as instructor pilots, we always briefed, hey, if we got to get out of the airplane, I'll race you for the handles. That was my favorite saying. Hey, if we got to get out of the jet, eject, 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 I'll race it for the handles and I'll see you on deck. So the mishap board ended up actually faulting Chili because he didn't say eject, eject, eject. He said, let's get out of here. I'm like, okay. But anyway, we did a survey. The mishap board did a survey of the students. And like, whatever, I forget, it was so long ago, 80% of the students or 90% of students said, well, they would have sat there and waited for the seat to fire. They would have been focusing on getting into a good body position. Every one of us instructors was like, oh my God, you are the dumbest people that ever lived. But we have to hold the mirror up to ourselves. I guess we're not communicating this enough. If we need to eject out of the airplane, because if he had pulled his ejection handle like before Chili, his Chili seat still would have fired first, but his would have fired too after Chili. So here's what happened. So the Marines and the Navy, we ground all the 2-seat F-18s. And they find out after doing an inspection on this Fetzer valve that it didn't have an inspection cycle. It was just, that's the Fetzer valve that goes to the front seat. It turns out in our squadron, since we were a training squadron, we had a ton of 2-seat jets. I think like almost every one of those jets, that Fetzer valve was corroded and busted.
So it wasn't part of the we call it PMCS, the preventative maintenance. It wasn't part of the checklist or whatever. Jeez. I mean, that's literally life or death equipment. Yeah.
Yep. So now, clearly, as a result of that mishap, the Fetzer valve gets inspected, and we stress to pull the handle. But I carried that with me as an instructor. If I had stuck to my guns, I told them in that mishap in that board, I'm like, he's a helo dude. He needs somebody else with him, man, or he can fly C-130s. He is not an F-18 pilot. Oh, I got buffaloed. I got rolled, and I regret it to this day. I should have stuck to. I still probably would have gotten overruled. Like, well, skipper, it's 4-1, and Whiz said no. Knowing the skipper at the time, the Marine colonel, he would have agreed with the majority of the board. But I got rolled, and I regret it. So that was a low light of my my instructor tour. And then a funny but horrific story, not as horrific as that, is this. In the Navy, I think it was a year, 10 months, whenever it was, you had to drop your letter. If you were going to get out, you had to give them whatever your notice was.
It was on your commission, yeah. Or at least
notice
to yeah.
Correct. So if you guys remember 1999, 2000, internet bubble and markets, and like a lemming, I followed just about every other dude or lady out of the door to go be a rich airline pilot. So I knew
the .com fortune.
Exactly. So my wife's uncle was one of the first pilots at FedEx. So I got hired by FedEx, had a class date and everything. And when you drop your letter in Washington, your name goes up on the whiteboard for the bad deals. So I'm literally sitting there in my office one day, and the executive officer comes in and goes, because the skipper of that squadron is always a Marine and the XO is always Navy. In the other two rags, it's Navy skipper and then Marine XO. So the Navy XO comes in, he's like, Whiz, and he sits down next to me. I'm like, well, this ain't usually good. He's like, so they need, I'm like, who's they? They need a mobile targeting officer.
My least favorite pronoun.
Yeah.
They.
They need a mobile targeting officer for JTF SWA, Joint Task Force Southwest Asia, in the Kayak in Riyadh in 2 days. And you're that guy. I'm like, Are you insane? I'm like, what? I had an 8-week-old baby at the time too. My oldest son had just been born in Balboa Naval Hospital. I'm looking at homes in Memphis, got my FedEx thing mapped out. He's like, well, you're going to be in Riyadh in essentially 48 hours. I'm like, there is a 0% probability that's going to, I've never seen anything in the military work like that. Guess what happened? In 24 hours to my home, a massive garment box showed up full of desert camo uniforms with my rank, my wings, Navy, name, desert, everything came, and with tickets. I mean, and he was right. 48 hours later, I am in Riyadh, sitting in the kayak, doing mobile targeting for Joint Task Force Southwest Asia. It was awful. Saying goodbye to my kid, and it was just that's how you thank somebody for 10 years of service. We're gonna stick it to you. So that sucked. That was not good. I remember staying in a condo and every day walking out of that condo. Now it's really interesting. Up on the big water tower, Bin Laden. Bin
It's
Laden,
the family name.
big family name in construction, and they had built this massive complex. So I'm like, Bin Laden, whatever. That's weird. Well, about a year later, I really found out who Bin Laden was. So that sucked. So I got home from that and separated, but thankfully, I had got hired by VFA 201, so Strike Fighter Squadron 201 at a Naval Air Station Fort Worth to fly F-18s for the reserves. So technically, I won the lottery. That was the lottery in 2000. Get out, fly fighters part-time, and be a rich airline pilot. It could not, my life could not have been any better. So
Is is that fairly common for guys that you turn in your paperwork and the Navy is like, hey, what is the worst assignment that we need to fill right now, and just shunt all these guys over there? Is that pretty common?
for the sake of time, I didn't tell you the full story. I wasn't the guy. The guy was one of my ex-friends. Why ex-friends? Because he got tasked with this like a month before the XO sat down and talked to me. I didn't know about this. He, when he was a RAG instructor, married a Brit. We were friends with her. We were all. He married a Brit, and he was the guy that got tagged to do this. Well, guess what happened? He had married a Brit, so they're like, "Hey, man, you need to go over to the wing, the Marine wing. You got to update your security clearance. You married a foreign national. You got to redo some paperwork." He's like, "Yeah, okay." Never did it. Reminded him, like, "Hey, you got to go take care of this, dude. What are you doing?" "Okay, I'm on it." The guy never went. Like up to a week before he was supposed to leave, he didn't even come into the squadron. Why that guy wasn't charged with being AWOL or anything like that and didn't get into trouble is a separate conversation. So that's why I got the 48 hours. I found out, yep, I got this like last minute. I'm like, XO, what are you talking about? He's like, well, his call sign was Frack. Frack was the guy, and he never updated his clearance. And they want a body, and you're next. I'm like, so I never spoke with that guy again, and he was pretty much shunned in the squadron, and I don't even know what happened to him. But talk about a BF move, so to speak. So the short answer to your long question, or vice versa, is yeah, you drop your letter, man. You are on the hook for whatever good deals that they have spinning. If they need a body and they don't care about really upsetting somebody, you dropped your letter. You're a quitter.
So you brought in the Millennium in Riyadh.
Yep, I was in it. Oh man, that's a whole episode. Living in Riyadh and being based in Riyadh, man. It's not even. I don't even want to talk about it because
The
it
kingdom.
sucked. Yeah.
But it was that was pretty much a year-long assignment.
No. It was 90 days. It was 3 months. Yeah. No. I mean, I was separating. They took me like right up to my. I think I got home and did my last flight in the squadron. That they hose you down and stuff like that, and then I was gone. I was heading to FedEx.
So from the time you turn in your paperwork how long is it before you are, I guess you are no longer active, you are now reserve?
8 months. Yeah. So I dropped my letter. 5 months later, hey, Whiz, you're going to Riyadh in 2 days. And then I got home and separated off active duty. And then they gained me right away into VFA 201. So there was technically no break in service. I went from active duty to being a reserve guy,
Yeah.
essentially the same day.
Man. That is really short, man. 8 months.
Yeah. So so I'm living the dream, man. We moved to Fort Worth, Texas. I'm flying F-18s as a reserve guy. It just doesn't get any better than that. And flying for FedEx, and I was miserable. I hated FedEx, man. I was having a commute from Fort Worth up to Memphis, flying from midnight to 7 in the morning, trying to get to the crew hotel before the sun came up, and trying to sleep during the day in a hotel with do not disturb on your door, and housekeeping. I'm like, can you not read? I hated FedEx. It was a miserable experience. So I'll never forget, man. I'm sitting in the squadron one day after a FedEx trip. I'm probably sleeping, or I don't know what time zone I'm in, because a FedEx trip would just take a lot out of you. And I remember sitting in the ready room, and my buddy Nips, call sign Nips, he was an American guy. Most of the guys in my reserve squadron in Fort Worth flew for American because it's DFW. That's the headquarters. What? So I remember sitting there, and Nips like threw his cell phone at me. He's like, "Hey, Whiz, if my phone rings and it says crew scheduling, tell him you're me and you'll be there in 2 hours. I'm going flying. See ya." I'm like, "What?" So he was going out to do a 1v1 dogfight. He's getting paid by the Navy doing a flight, and he's sitting reserve for American. I'm like, done. So I left FedEx and went to American Airlines. I went through my training, and the morning of September 11th, 2001, I am packing for my first trip for American Airlines. And my beautiful bride comes in, and she's like, you better come out and, look at the TV. Somebody hit the World Trade Center with an airplane. And I'm like, I'm busy, woman. Small airplane, bad weather.
How could that happen?
Yeah. Went out to I'll never forget this, obviously, but I went out to the TV room, and beautiful blue skies, not a cloud in the sky in New York City, and a massive smoking hole. So I'm standing there going through my mental aviation checklist of how that could have happened. Boom. Immediately knew we were under attack. I ran into the bedroom. I still have it in this closet in plastic wrap. I pushed my American Airlines uniform from the tailors out of the way. I threw on my flight suit, threw on my boots, didn't tie my boots. I jumped into my old Porsche, and I broke the land speed record getting out to Naval Air Station Fort Worth just as they closed it, and went to ThreadCon Delta. Got up into the ready room, and it was me and Gruff, Lieutenant Commander John McGrath. Gruff and I made it out there. We're like, oh my God, man, we got to do something. Called down to maintenance. Chief, what do you got? He's like, we got 4 Hornets. I said, get 2 of them fueled and ready to go. We got any missiles or bullets? We got bullets. Throw bullets in the nose. Around that time, the other phone rang, and it was the general next door. So we were next to an Air Force F-16 reserve squadron. And as you guys are well aware, the Air Force is rich. They got money. They're tied into NORAD, right? They have a command post. And the general said, what do you got, Whiz? I'm like, it's me and Gruff. We got 2 Hornets getting some gas and some bullets. He said, get over here. I got 4 F-16 guys who made it in here. Let's brief. I'm like, we're on our way. So we ran over to the command post, went in there, a beehive of activity. They got all the screens up, the generals, on the phone to NORAD and stuff. It was like Lexington and Concord, man. A bunch of citizen soldiers, citizen airmen. We're hunched over the table. They're used to this type of operation. So their jets are getting fueled. They're getting armed up. We didn't have any sidewinders. We didn't have any missiles. And we have different cooling bottles. So the general was barking orders at this one maintenance officer, like, rejigger the nitrogen bottles to go arm up the hunters, figure out how to make that stuff work. So the plan was, since they were getting ready quicker, they were going to launch first. Gruff and I were going to go to the end of the runway, and as soon as they hit bingo fuel and landed, we'd get airborne. Um, as we're briefing all this stuff, Pentagon gets hit. We're like, oh my God, let's get going. So ran out to the jets. They get airborne. Gruff and I are at the end of the runway. I remember just sitting at the end of the runway looking at my wingtips with live air-to-air missiles and bullets in the nose. By the time they hit bingo fuel, everybody had more or less landed, right? So Gruff and I, sat there, for a couple hours with the engines turning just in case. It was an absolutely surreal moment. Got home that night, collapsed on the couch, just adrenaline. Woke up the next
Adrenaline
morning,
dump.
right
Yeah.
back into the. Oh yeah, it was the adrenaline dump, man. I got back into the squadron the next morning, and it was a beehive of activity. And I'll never forget this. On the table in the ready room was an ATO, an air tasking order. Yep. The only other time I had read an ATO was where? On the boat off Iraq.
Persian Gulf.
The ATO is, it's the rules of engagement, man. Here's who you can shoot, when you can shoot, all sorts of stuff like that. I'm like, ATO, United States. I'm like, holy crap. Open up the ATO, man. First paragraph. 25-mile radius of Washington and New York City is a free fire zone. If it flies, kill it. No question. I'm like reading this thing. I'm like, oh my God. What? I mean, this is insanity. It is real. So we were doing rotating alerts. They were called the SPADs, the 457th Fighter Squadron. So we were doing rotating alerts in the days following the attacks. And if you guys remember, like each day after the attacks, the FAA was like, all right, we're trying to open the airspace today. Didn't. We're trying to open the airspace today. Didn't. So the third, was it the 14th? I think it was the 14th. Gruff and I just happened to be paired again. But this time we had relaxed the alert posture to alert 15, which means you're in the ready room, in your flight gear, and then there's power on the jet. So if you get scrambled, it's a pretty, you got to be airborne within 15 minutes, alert 15. So Gruff and I are just, in the ready room talking about, holy crap, everything that's going on. Scramble 2 hunters, unknown contact airborne, 100 miles south, scramble. We jump up out of the ready room. We sprint out to the jets. We briefed whoever got started first. You got the lead type of thing. So I got started first. And as we're taxiing out, the command post, the SPAD told us, hey, somebody got airborne down near Waco. There's prohibited airspace down in Crawford. That's where George Bush's ranch was. I think there might have been an E3 airborne White House zipping around too. But anyway, I get airborne. Gruff and I get airborne out of Naval Air Station Fort Worth. I'm at like 1,000 feet, and I am supersonic, man. You're not allowed to go supersonic unless you're 30 miles off the coast.
Yeah. Or over the U.S.
Yeah, or out in Fallon, Nevada. Out in the desert type of thing. I'm at 1,000 feet over Texas, man. Boom, and live missiles, and I don't know what this is. Well, turns out this was some old guy, some like 75-year-old granddad taking his grandson flying in their little Piper Cub. He had thought the airspace was open. So I'm hauling the mail down there. I locked this thing up on radar. It's going at like 80 knots. I'm doing the speed of God. Throttles to idle, speed brake out. I'm pulling, I'm like a dog on a kitchen floor, man. Just, finally get my landing gear speed is 250.
He may as well have been in a biplane, right?
Yeah, exactly. The Red Baron. So I fly by this guy, and finally, we get his attention, and he ends up landing like at a grass strip. And it was funny because they're like, hey, can you, we're flying a helicopter out there. Can you maintain station? I'm like, yeah, sure. So we end up doing like a little air show down this grass strip, man. I'm like raging down at like 10 feet and, burner going up and stuff like that. And then they eventually come up. They're like, well, they're not even letting a sheriff's helicopter get airborne. Can you hang out? Secret Services. So there's some black SUVs and Texas State Trooper cars that finally come. So Gruff and I head back to Fort Worth. It was like, so we got to fly over DFW. I'm talking to the controllers. They're like, I think there's 4 aircraft airborne over the U.S. right now. You clearly can go wherever you want. So we fly over DFW, and it looks like a movie set, man. There are airliners everywhere. You ain't allowed to fly over DFW at 100 feet. We did. It was crazy. Here's the funny part. So I land, Gruff and I land. We're in the ready room, telling our there I was story to everybody in the ready room, and my phone rings, and it's crew scheduling. Or I thought it was a joke at first. So I answer, and it's like, "Hi, First Officer Buckley." I'm like, "Yeah, this is Steve. At American. Your first flight's tomorrow." I thought it was a joke. I thought it was one of the guys in the squadron playing. I'm like, "Yeah, okay, Steve,
Pilots would do that to each other.
whatever." Yeah, trust me. So the guy's like, I'm serious. So, is there some misunderstanding? I'm like, "What are you talking about, man?" He's like, "You're First Officer Buckley, right? Yeah. You have your first trip tomorrow." I'm like, "Dude, it's over with." I'm like, "Are you living in a cave? It's done. There's no way." What? He's like, "Well, if you don't, show up, you're fired. You're on probation." I'm like, "All right, man, I'll be there." September 15th. I drive out to DFW, man. I get to the jet, and my instructor is there. He's like, "Dude, I wasn't even going to show up. I can't believe you're here." I'm like, "Oh, great." So we end up, I think we're one of a handful of airliners that flies that day. And we went from DFW to Miami, and we had about 30 people on there. You know who it was? It was American Airlines employees based in Miami who were stuck in
They had to
Dallas.
get home. Yeah.
Yeah, they had to get home. So here's the funny part is, so we're flying down from DFW to Miami, and the captain, this guy's got 20 years at American. He's like, "Man, it's over with." He's like, I might be, in trouble." I'm like, "Dude, I'm sitting right here, man. I'm a new hire, and you're worried about your job." But he goes, this airline, man, I got furloughed in the 90s. I was on a trip. I landed in Columbus, Ohio, and the captain came up to me. He's like, "Hey, I just got a message. You're furloughed. I need your ID card." They didn't even give me a ride home, but thank God I knew the gate agent, and she gave me a ticket back. I could get home. Can you believe that? I'm like, "Oh, wow." We land in Miami. We're in the the crew hotel, whatever. I'm like checking in, get my room key, and there's the captain over there on his cell phone. And after I check in, the captain comes up to me and he's like, "Whiz, you're not going to believe this." I'm like, "Try me." He's like, "That was crew scheduling. You're furloughed, and I need to get your ID." So I flew one flight for American Airlines and got furloughed.
You count as an alumnus then. I mean,
Wow.
Yeah.
Apparently, Steve at scheduling knew some people.
Yeah.
It was like, I'm not going to deal with this guy anymore.
Oh my God, man. So one flight for American and got furloughed. So that was that's my airline career. FedEx to American. Thank God I could reserve, thank God I'm not thanking God we were at war and stuff, but technically our squadron got a ton more money because everybody's getting ready to go to war. So I could reserve
money.
bomb.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to. I just lost my rich airline job and my health care. So I got a wife, a son. We had to scramble. I mean, my wife ended up waiting tables at an Italian restaurant. I started reserve bumming as much as I could, doing 29 days of active duty type of thing. So, I kind of strung it together. And then around that time, 03 or something like that, OIF started heating up. And there was a Tomcat squadron that was in the middle of transitioning to F-18Fs, and they weren't going to be done in time for the cruise, a war cruise. So the Navy looked around and said, "Well, that's why you guys exist." So they mobilized us. So we were the first Navy fighter squadron mobilized for combat since the Korean War. But it sucked because, in a reserve squadron, we had like 18, 19 slack-jawed, hippie, long-haired reservists with dirty boots. But usually most F-18 squadrons on the ship, there's only about 15, right? There's not room for a ton of pilots. So they kind of split us up. They said, "All right, well, this group will go first, and then we'll rotate guys out. Whiz, you'll rotate in towards the second half of the cruise," type of thing. So I did workups with them, and it was funny. This is why ultimately our squadron got disestablished. We proved you could take, because every one of us in that squadron was multiple 1,000-hour Hornet guys. Almost all of us were Top Gun graduates. So you had the most technically elite group of guys who are all slack-jawed airline pilots. So when we went on the boat, all the other kids in the air wing were like, "Wait a minute. This guy's an American captain making 300 grand a year flying fighters, and he's out here dropping bombs and he's going home to his career. why am I doing this? So, our squadron ended up being like all the strike leads. Our squadron ended up being the top hook with the best landing grades aboard the boat. So the CAG in charge of that air wing could not have hated us anymore, right? Because all the young kids would come hang out in our ready room, like, so tell me more about,
Tell me
getting
stories.
out and going to the airlines.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I'll never forget, man. I had my sea bag packed. It literally was like near the front door, and I got a message from the skipper. He's like, "It's over with, man. We're coming home." I mean, fast forward, we knew in hindsight it wasn't over with, but OIF was pretty quick. They cut the cruise short. It ended up, instead of being like a 8-month war cruise, they were home in like 3 months or 4 months. So I didn't get to
Mission
go.
accomplished. We all remember.
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Yeah,
we all remember that. Mission accomplished. Whiz, sorry you didn't get to come out. And there was like 4 or 5 of us that were going to rotate in. I'm like, man. But as we all know, it didn't work out that way. But Admiral Fallon, who actually started his naval career as a reservist, which is funny, well-known reserve hater, we proved it. We proved you could take a Navy Reserve Hornet squadron and drop them in the middle of an air wing in combat, and they'd crush it. Well, guess what? After we got back, Big Navy, nobody in Big Navy liked any of that. So mysteriously, a short time after getting home, they're like, yeah, the Navy needs all your jets. So we're going to disestablish you. So the Hunters, VFA 201, ended up getting disestablished in 06, I think it was. So that was my 15-year fighter career. It ended up with our squadron being disestablished. So it was a great run, man. But in 15 years of flying fighters, I lost 16 brothers and a sister, and not a single combat loss. Not one of those 16 was in combat. Bad weather, mechanical stupidity, everything that we just talked about. But that doesn't make the trauma any less, right? I mean, these were, eating dinner with K9, and an hour later he's dead in the Pacific Ocean. I mean, it was some serious trauma. And then along the way, I lost 4 F-18 brothers to suicide. A groomsman in my wedding, one of my best friends, Captain Eric Swenson, Marine F-18 pilot, beautiful bride, 5 kids, decided not to stay around anymore. So it was a lot of trauma, as you guys are well aware, fighter aviation, naval aviation. Tonight we drink, tomorrow we die. It was a pretty hard drinking, pretty hard charging culture. And after I got furloughed, so we'll detail into the civilian world real quick, because it's one of the reasons I started my foundation. On active duty, you guys know you don't join the military to get rich. You join the military to see the world and, deliver justice to bad guys. So after I got furloughed, I got hired by JetBlue, right? That would have been my 3rd airline in as many years: FedEx, American, JetBlue. But I taught myself how to trade. Sitting in the ready room, I'm reading the Wall Street Journal. I was always interested in finance. Like, wait a minute, I can buy stock in Boeing and it might go up. Yeah. So I taught myself how to trade options. And I applied everything I was learning as a fighter pilot to trading, right? Having a strategy, implementing tactics to support the strategy, managing risk, contingency planning, right? Before even placing a trade, knowing what I'm going to do if things go wrong.
The OODA loop.
So that's exactly right. So I applied all that to my trading, and I was like, clearly everybody's printing money, because this ain't hard. Trading's a form of combat when you think about it. Somebody's going to win and somebody's going to get their rear end handed to them. Which one do you want to be? I bring that up because I popped up on the radar of a really large Wall Street firm headquartered in the Chicago Board of Trade. And this was when, I'm 05-ish, still flying the Hornet. And I needed some nighttime. So I actually took a Hornet up to Winnetka, just outside of Chicago, and met with the owners of this volatility arbitrage firm. And they said, what do you do? I'm like, well, that's what I do. And they're like, yeah, you're starting with us like in a week. I'm like, what? What the hell would I do? What are you talking? I felt like Eddie Murphy in Trading Places. I'm like, what are you talking about? And then they wrote down a number, and I'd never seen that many zeros in my life. I'm like, when do I start? So We ended up moving up to Chicago, and I bring this up because I ended up becoming somebody I used to make fun of. When I lived in Fort Worth, I was proficient. I flew more as a reservist than I did on active duty. Because on active duty, I had 20 ground jobs. As a reservist, I didn't have any ground jobs essentially. I flew so much in the reserve. But some guys in the reserve squadron lived in Denver or wherever, and they commuted in to do their reserve duty. But they weren't proficient in the airplane. I'd be flying with these guys like, dude, don't kill me, man. You're a United guy living in Denver. You're not proficient in the jet. I'm going to keep an eye on you. So, we used to give the commuters a ration of crap for being commuters. Well, we moved to Chicago, and now I'm having to commute from Chicago down to Fort Worth. So I became the guy I used to make fun of. So you got to be proficient in the F-18. You just you gotta do it, right? Lead, follower, get out of the way. So there was rumors we were going to be disestablished. So around that time, I'm like, man, I'm not proficient in the jet. I don't want to scare me or anybody else. So I kind of left on my own accord, right? Kind of on a little bit of a high note. I don't think I was going to get promoted, all that type of stuff. I'm like, you know what? This was a good run. So I did a George Costanza. I'm out of here. Kind of left on a high note. I'll never forget my last flight in the Hornet. It was with the skipper and another one of my buddies. It was a 1 versus 1 versus 1. 3-man enter, 1-man leave type of thing. Just a huge. I almost crashed the jet landing, man, because I was crying. I had tears in my eyes, just streaming down my face. Parked that jet for the last time. Got out. My mom was there. My dad had passed away, sadly, of a heart attack a year or two before, which was pretty devastating. But my bride was there, and with now my middle son Jack had been born, so there they were with the fire truck and the fire hose and all that stuff. But I bring up the diversion to Wall Street because I went from a fighter squadron where you trust the women and men in that organization with your life, or they're not there for long, they're gone, to a Wall Street firm where I couldn't trust a guy to watch my wallet for 5 minutes if I went to the head. Just a horrible environment. I'm not joking when I say this. There was guys that would probably push their own mother in front of a bus for $1. I mean, so I got separated from a mission. I got separated from myself, who I truly am, my wife, my kids, hit the bottle pretty hard. And then Wall Street trading floors and traders are well known for the drug habit. And sadly, I spiraled very hard, out of control. I started circling the drain, man. And it was not a pretty picture. So after about 3 years in Chicago, I'm like, I'm a Navy guy. I'm a beach guy. I need a boat, sun, and sand. And February in Chicago is a survival situation.
I mean, Chicago has water. I mean, it's frozen.
You know how many people said that?
It's frozen in February.
Yeah. So we got Lake Michigan. I'm like, it's a lake. I don't care if the Edmund Fitzgerald sank somewhere out there. It's a lake. So, my bride's from Boca Raton, Florida, God's waiting room. So we moved down here, and I started my own, financial trading company. But around that time, after my buddy Swede had checked out, I said, you know what? We got to do something about veteran suicide. I mean, I lost a guy in the Marine RAG as an instructor. They found out he was like fudging his hours in his logbook. He put a bullet in his head in the parking lot. I mean, Captain Lauren Kittle, Jaws. So around, about 4.5 years ago, after Swede died, I looked at Susie. I'm like, why don't we start a foundation to try and end veteran suicide? Yeah, great idea. Because I'd done pretty good on Wall Street, and I'm not one to quote scripture too often, but it'll be easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. So I said, let's throw a lot of this over the fence. I mean, I like having a nice house and car and college funds paid for it. Other than that, let's do something good. So I started a foundation to try and end veteran suicide, but sitting in front of my whiteboard, I'm like, how do you keep a veteran from killing themselves? Do you help them pay their rent, write a resume, buy a suit? I'm just throwing stuff up against the wall. And around that time, a buddy of mine said, "Hey, there's a group of Navy SEAL vets and operators that go down to Mexico, and they do psychedelic assisted therapy to heal their trauma. And there's a really cool group going in a couple weeks. Would you like to go?" And I said, "Man, go to Mexico and do drugs with Navy SEALs? It sounds like a great weekend. Sign me up." I
Just for
had
just for context, what year is this?
This is May of 21. We started the foundation like towards the end of 2020, and then when I found out about all this stuff, this is March, April, May of 21. Yeah, so hey, really cool group going. So Marcus Luttrell, you guys know, obviously Marcus Luttrell, Navy Cross recipient, wrote a book,
Lone Survivor.
movie,
Yep.
Mark Wahlberg, yep, Lone Survivor, and then JT, Jared Taylor, one of the founders of Black Rifle Coffee, another team guy, Navy SEAL who was with Marcus, and then an NFL player who was suffering from some very bad head trauma. He was an All-American at Iowa.
The CTE.
Yep, CTE. But sadly, they don't know if you have CTE until after you're dead and you open up your melon.
Yeah.
It's post-mortem. But you ask him, he's like, I clearly had it. His name's Robert Gallery. So he's an All-American at Iowa, then played for the Raiders for a while. So I said, you know what? Yeah, I'll go try this. Why not? Man, so I learned an SAT word after doing this that I probably should have known in high school: ineffable. Anything we're going to talk about just absolutely fails. My words.
There's no word for it.
Nope. I will not be able to convey anything accurately. But anyway, so we fly into San Diego. I meet these guys. Why do you fly into San Diego? Because if you do what I'm telling you in San Diego, you're a felon. If you do it an hour south, it'll save and change your life, like it did for me and the 4 other guys, and the close to 75 men and women we've helped so far. So flying to San Diego, meet Marcus, JT, all these shaking hands, and we got in a bunch of cars to convoy down to the clinic, and I was in the car with Robert, the football player. I'm sitting next to a 300-pound dead dude. He was a gray iceberg. I mean, just he looked and smelled like death. I'll fast forward a year. A year later, I'm at a fundraiser in San Diego, and this big, massive mountain bumps into me. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get my ass kicked. What's going on? And it was Robert. Didn't recognize him. He was a completely different human being. Never, it was stunning to me. I didn't even recognize him. But anyway, so we all go down to a place called the Mission Within. It's about an hour and a half south of San Diego on the Pacific. Beautiful, beautiful place. And Friday night, man, we do our intentions, and then we take a medicine called ibogaine. Iboga is the most powerful psychedelic on the planet. It comes from Gabon, Africa, Central West Africa, and some people believe it's actually the tree of knowledge. It's got 12 what are called alkaloids in it, and in the West, we pull out one of the alkaloids. It's called ibogaine, which is incredible for PTSD, traumatic brain injury, and addiction. I was a drinker, like I told you guys, not proud to say, up to a year, 8 months to a year after sitting with ibogaine once, I couldn't even look at. If I smelled alcohol, it made me dry heave. I'd get sick. So we sat with ibogaine, and I've done some challenging things, man. We've talked about some of my challenging things, landing a Hornet in the middle of the Pacific at night in bad weather, low on fuel, was a walk in the park compared to this. It was not fun. It was one of the most challenging things I've ever done in my life. And it was without a doubt the most transformational and spiritual thing that's ever happened to me. It's a waking dream, right? You got your eye shades on, eye shades up. There's Marcus. There's the nurses. All right, eye shades back down. Man, I'll give you the cliff notes. I was reconnected with my faith that I had lost. I was sexually abused as a child. My sister Monica was killed by a drunk driver. What type of God allows those things to happen? 16 aviators Gone. What type of God allows that to happen? Well, I met the God that allows that to happen. Uh, he erased all of the drugs, all of the alcohol, all of the shame, the regret, the trauma, the sadness, scrubbed. It was gone. I reconnected with my sister. I reconnected with my father, um, who have never left. I thought they died and they're up on a cloud in heaven somewhere. They are right here. They are right here on this podcast. They are in the trees. They are in the sun, the wind. They just simply transitioned. It was incredible. I cannot say enough about it. Mine was, it was a one man luge for 12 to 14 hours. I think at one point I tried to roll on my side, and it took about an hour. Marcus, JT, they were in it, man. I was like, I remember at one point hearing, some stuff, and I'm like, I got to help these guys. And I remember God saying, Matthew, I, I got, I'm with you right now. I said, God, no, I'm an aviator. The ground guys, I got to go help them. And God just gently, Matthew, they are getting exactly what they need. Trust me. And I did. The next morning, it was like Christmas morning, man. I ran downstairs, I'm healed type of thing. And, the other guys came down. I looked at them. I'm like, because it sounded like, I'm like, you good? Mark is like, never better. I'm like, sounded like you were killing some demons with your hands. He's like, I was. And they're gone. Robert was in the medicine probably for a day and a half. And I remember the doctors and the nurses kind of sensing we were a little worried for Robert. And they're like, he's getting exactly what he needs. The medicine's doing some deep cleaning. So I'll spare the rest of the details. But I met these guys on Friday. By Sunday, they were without a doubt my soulmates and lifelong friends. I mean, we text throughout the week. We still call each other, check in. We might do an annual knock the rust off. They've done one of those, but I had my own retreat, so I missed it. But sending them some love. But I got home from that retreat. I looked at my bride and I said, This is how we're going to end veteran suicide. So the No Fallen Heroes Foundation gives healing grants to veterans, first responders, and families to go heal with these medicines.
At the same place?
Different at that place, another place nearby. Thank you to the voters in the great states of Oregon and Colorado. These medicines are legal at the state level. So, and that would infuriate me. The first 2 years of the foundation, getting on an airliner to take veterans to another country to heal trauma incurred serving this one would make me furious. Then Oregon and Colorado stepped up. And now my main mission objective was to start healing our heroes at home. And we are. So I'm proud to say, when was that? 23? 23 or early 24, we did our first healing retreat in the great state of Colorado. So we've done 3 or 4 in Colorado. We've done 2 in Oregon. And then I recently did one in Oklahoma a couple weeks ago they operate under a church banner or a spiritual banner. So Uncle Sam can't tell you how to practice your religion. So there are a lot of clinics now that are opening in different states that operate under the Religious Freedom Act. So, first responders, a lot of men and women get on active duty. They take off the uniform. They don't take off the trauma, and they go be a first responder. I have a Marine buddy who's like, dude, my trauma as a 20-year Marine was a joke compared to fire rescue down in Miami. Things that people could do to a child or to each other. So we help first responders and then spouses. My wife served. She put up with me through my hell, and she deserved to heal. And Gold Star moms, spouses, dads deserve to heal. We've helped some folks. Now let me, because you guys know I laugh at my quote combat flights over Iraq. They were flying. I completely skipped over this, but I went to Top Gun in 2003 in the reserves. And it's funny. Let's tell this story real quick, because when I got to Top Gun as a slack-jawed reservist, you know who most of my instructors were? My RAG students. So I'm like, I walked into Top Gun and they're like, "Oh, Whiz
Look
Buckley."
who
I'm like,
showed up.
"Oh." I'm like,
Time for
"Oh
payback.
no." They got me, man. It was, and I remember being a slack-jawed reservist, being in my BOQ room with models and like focusing on my brief. I had never studied so hard in my life because I knew those guys were going to stick it to me. But I forgot about that whole Top Gun story because um, having the students pay me back was a funny part of it. But I bring that up because flying at Top Gun and being an adversary pilot was harder than the combat hops, so to speak. So that the toughest flying I did in my career was at Top Gun, not over Iraq. But anyway, so veterans, first responders, and family members. I bring the not combat hops up because I felt ashamed. I'm lying in a room with Marcus, JT, another team guy who actually experienced combat. I'm in the air conditioning at 30,000 feet. I had shame. I learned something. We, as veterans, we do a horrible job at this. We trauma grade or trauma shame.
Nobody's harder on veterans than other veterans.
I'm like, these guys are at 3 feet. I'm at 30,000 feet. They were in actual combat. You're a wuss. You don't deserve to heal. Whoa. That's trauma shaming. That's trauma grading. Sexually abused as a child, lost a sister to a drunk driver. Trauma is trauma. If something's hurting you, it's hurting you, and you deserve to heal. Don't trauma shame or trauma grade. I did that. Why do I bring this up? Because I got home and said, this is how we're going to end veteran suicide. And I talked to some fellow female naval aviators and, hey, Whiz, we'd love to heal our trauma. I'm like, okay, great. This is what we do. And they said, yeah, it's not from the combat. It's from rape and sexual assault. So I kicked over a rock I knew nothing about. MST, military sexual trauma. So in the past 3.5, 4 years, we have helped people who were never near the front lines or saw combat. You expect the enemy to shoot at you or try and kill you or hurt you. You don't expect your squadron mate to hurt
That's
you.
hard. Yeah, that's horrible.
So we have helped. Yeah. We've helped several women and men who have experienced MST in the most brutal way that I don't even. Because the organization I went with years ago was only helping Navy SEALs heal. I was allowed to go because I donated a nice check to them to go. Then there was another organization that was also doing this, but they were only helping combat veterans heal with these medicines. I'm like, I ain't no combat veteran, man. So I went big tent. I said, I'm going to help everybody heal who put on a uniform or was married or associated with them. So we went big tent with the No Fallen Heroes Foundation, and helping some of these women and men who have experienced MST has just been absolutely incredible. So that's the No Fallen Heroes Foundation. If anybody's interested, you can go to nofallenheroes.com, and up on the top right, it says grant request. I hate talking like this, but sadly, we're a victim of our own success. It's a Ponzi scheme, man. You heal, you get home, and you want to get everybody, help everybody. Our list is growing exponentially. I wake up each day and I don't want to sometimes look at my phone because every 3-5 grants a day request. I haven't read a grant request that doesn't make me tear up or cry. These people are hurting. And I know for a fact, knock on wood, the 70-ish, however many people we've helped to date, not a single one of these people has come off a retreat and said, I'm worse, that sucked, what a waste of time. Not one. Have there been challenges during integration? Yeah. This is work. When you get a clean piece of paper and you come home, if you don't change the things that made you sick or were part of your past and your trauma, it's going to be a dogfight. But thankfully, anybody who's had kind of a tough integration has ultimately, lifted and risen above. I stopped going to DC. I went to DC for a couple of years to talk to lawmakers and advocate for this. I stopped. Why? Because one day a Republican who shall remain nameless behind closed doors. Whiz, I love what you're doing. Okay, great. You're going to have a problem with the big pharma and the alcohol and tobacco folks. And I'm like, what do you mean I'm going to have a problem with them? Ain't that your job? So I've stopped. Uh, Marcus was on 15 meds, 5 to wake up, 5 for lunch, 5 to go to bed. He hasn't taken a single medication in 4 years. So this is a threat. I already told you guys I was a drinker and it destroyed alcohol in my life. So this medicine is a Schedule 1 and a crime. But tobacco and alcohol are 100% legal. Remember, the definition of a Schedule 1 drug is no therapeutic use and a high risk of addiction. That's a cigarette, and that's alcohol. Ibogaine is anti-addictive. It destroys addictions, and it's the most therapeutic thing I've ever done in my 5 decades on this planet. It's illegal. Ask yourself why. So I'm done with the DC appearances because it makes my skin crawl. I have April 29th on my calendar. That's the 100-day point of the Trump administration. Why do I have that? Because I guess I still a little am, bullish. I was hopeful. Why? J.D. Vance, Senator Vance at the time, was on Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan gave him a 10 to 15-minute lecture on veterans healing with psychedelics. To his credit, Vance said, man, I didn't know any about this. And some people give him grief for that. Why would he know, right? It's not talked about. But Joe Rogan did a great job schooling J.D. Vance. And at the end of the conversation, J.D. Vance, who's now obviously our vice president, was like, "Why? I don't get this. Why aren't we using this for veterans then?" Aha. Pete Hegseth, current SecDef, was on the Sean Ryan podcast. Sean Ryan went to the same place in Mexico I went, kind of had the same experience I did, and said it saved and changed his life. And Pete Hegseth, to his credit, said the same thing. He's like, I haven't done it, but I've had a lot of brothers and sisters do it. I hear the same results. Why aren't we doing anything? The guy's SecDef now. Robert Kennedy, when he was running as a Democrat, was asked about psychedelics. It's a great 3-minute clip you should listen to. I'll give you the cliff notes. He said, well, as a recovering heroin addict and alcoholic, I could not have been more anti-psychedelic. It just sounded like you're trading one thing, bad thing for another. Then my wife killed herself in 2012. And then one of my sons was going to be next. I could tell. His mom's death, he was done. One of his best friends took him to Peru. And when I saw him get off the airplane, I immediately knew I had my son back. It saved his life. So he went from being the most anti to the most pro. So we got J.D. Vance, we got Hegseth, we got the HHS secretary. Could not be more pro psychedelic.
Trump's he's a teetotaler, so
yeah. Exactly. But I'm a little worried about the VA secretary. I'm not going to super prejudge, but he's a preacher. And if you guys check out my social media, most of the folks who attack me the hardest about this are the most religious and the most Christian. Yeah. You didn't meet God, it was the devil. You didn't see your sister, it was a demon. I'm like, oh my God, man. Go back to church. You're practicing idolatry. I'm like, I've never been more connected with God in my life. I was lost. Now I am found. And these people froth at the mouth coming after me. I bring this up because the current VA secretary is a preacher. He's a military guy, but I haven't heard a single word out of his mouth about psychedelic assisted therapy for veterans, which is, so I went from being super bullish to the middle of the 100 days being neutral. And if on day 100, I haven't heard anything, not that they care about my social media, I will take a flamethrower to all of these people. I am not partisan. I am neutral on this issue, but I try and go on every retreat, but I had a couple scheduling conflicts for 2 of them. Both retreats I missed. I got texts from a couple of the people that said, Whiz, I don't want to kill myself anymore. You can't put a dollar sign. You can't put anything on that. I know this works. You guys know as well as I do, the VA is a pill factory. If you can get an appointment 10 months into the future, what's wrong with you? Well, these things. Here's the script. Next, it's a pill factory between the VA and big pharma. So I stopped going to DC because this isn't going to come from them down. It's going to come from we the people up. So Marcus gets home, and his brother Morgan Luttrell, Navy SEAL, combat experience, trauma. It looks like their mom hiccuped. Marcus and Morgan are twins, SEALs, the whole 9 yards. He looks at his brother and is like, "The hell happened to you?" He's like, "Well, maybe I better go do this." Morgan Luttrell, his exact quote is like, "It was the best ass kicking of my life." He got home and ran for Congress, and now he's Congressman Morgan Luttrell. So it's incredible that all the SEAL team guys are all pro psychedelic for veterans. Dan Crenshaw hasn't sat with the medicine, but knows all the guys that have. So this is the one.
Yeah, I know some ranger guys that are into it too, and they're getting pretty vocal on social media.
So in this country right now, we could not be more divided, partisan, Democrat, Republican. I saw a headline like a year ago that said Dan Crenshaw and AOC. I didn't want to read the rest of it. I'm like, what? Got no fist fight?
Yeah.
Agree on psychedelic assisted therapy for veterans. If we can, this is one of the only issues where both sides are agreeing and nothing is happening. So that tells me that the congressman was speaking truth behind closed doors. If you're Pfizer, Moderna, and you hear that Marcus hasn't taken a single medication in 4 years and that he healed his PTSD, you ain't going to be happy if you're big pharma. So it's sad. Well, it's not sad. I'm helping to save and change lives. It helped save and change my life, and I know it's doing it to others. But it's sad that you have to follow the money in this country as to why we're not moving on this issue.
Well, I'm kind of an all of the above approach on this. I mean, as a general rule, I'm against the use of hard drugs and narcotics just for their own sake. However, I mean, I'm also very pragmatic about if these things are working and we're having outcomes, maybe it deserves a really hard look.
Well, remember these aren't drugs, right? Plants that God put on this planet for us to heal aren't drugs. Drugs to me are
not
made
synthetic. Yeah.
Well, drugs to me are made in a lab by a dude in a lab coat with a beaker,
right,
who's focused on profit. God put iboga, psilocybin. He put this stuff on this planet for us to heal. If you go to the middle of the Amazon and tell a medicine woman what's wrong with you, she will walk you through the forest and find something that will cure you. Right. So I use this term as medicine. Marcus will tell you, he's like, for the first time in my existence, I've been healed. A doctor has healed me, not treated me. I am actually healed. He told the doc down the next day after he got off out of the medicine. He's like, for the first time in my life, after being broken back, VA, everything, he's like, I'm healed. So I hear you, but most people when they use the drug word with me, I'm like, this ain't a drug, man.
Yeah, I just mean lowercase d drug in the sense that it's a material that provides some kind of reaction to it. So I mean, whether that be caffeine.
Agreed. Yeah, and I agree with you. So I tell people there are so many different healing modalities. I found yoga, right? 5 years ago, before when I was spiraling the drain, a buddy of mine's like, dude, you should go try hot yoga. I'm like, if I saw me doing a downward dog, I'd kick my own ass, man. Are you kidding me? I went to yoga. Girls do yoga. This can't be hard. 30 minutes into my first 60-minute hot vinyasa, I thought I was going to die. I was laying on my back as girls were looking at me like laughing at me. I'm like, oh my God, what an embarrassment. So got into hot yoga, and that taught me about linking breath work with movement. And then I met one of my yoga instructors, and she's like, well, clearly you meditate, right? I'm like, I can't sit still for 10 seconds without thinking. So I went on a meditation retreat. So yoga, breathwork, meditation, and then the medicine was a great path that God provided me. So to your point, I'm an all of the above guy too. Yoga can help save and change your life. Meditation, breathwork, climbing a mountain in Nepal, going to the beach. There are so many different healing modalities. I say that radical trauma might need radical healing. these medicines are absolutely radical healing. And I'll be clear, these are absolutely not for everybody. No way in hell am I saying that. But I will tell you, I will give you some phrases that if I heard before sitting with the medicine, I would have given me a wedgie and taken my lunch money. The medicine calls to you. If you're listening to this right now and you're like, that sounds like the dumbest thing I've ever heard, it ain't calling to you. If you're sitting here right now going, hmm, the medicine's calling to you. It's one or the other. And I've heard so many people tell me that. They're like, I heard you say that before I did. And then you were absolutely right. And I'll also share this with you. The second you agree, you know what? I'm going to give this a shot. The universe changes. God, whatever word you choose to use, I use the word God, but the universe, creator, divine, source, consciousness hears that. And you'd be amazed at how things start maneuvering. When I look back on, you know what, I will go down with those guys and I reread my journal about everything that happened. Absolutely, the world and things started shifting to align. Something out there recognizes that when you say, you know what, I want to be a better husband, father, human being, I'm going to do this, things start changing and things start getting better for you. So it's been an incredible experience. It's part of my healing. When I was in Oklahoma a couple weeks ago at Rising Ridge, retired Navy senior chief who had a horrific trauma as a corpsman with the Marines. Um, when I hold space for, it was 15 guys, man, amputees. I mean, there was 15 vets who were, this was a tough one. And in the 4 to 6 hours to see and just to feel the healing that went on. Thursday, these guys show up. Yeah, I kind of saw you on a Zoom call. Hi, yeah, nice to meet you in person. Everybody's standoffish to when they're leaving Sunday, crying and hugging each other. It's part of my healing too. I just, uh, it, you know, it can be a lot too, because there is a lot of, when you hold space for all that energy and all the,
It's trauma.
there's some pretty
Yeah.
serious stuff going on. Yeah, it's and but to see it released, man, to see these guys, we take before and afters. You should see some of the pictures, man. Here's your before picture, and then the after. Eyes are brighter, lighter, bluer, and they just look lighter. So if this doesn't resonate with you, great. I'd love to help you some other way, but if it does, we are here to help, and hopefully, like I said, by the 100-day point, I hear something out of our government. In December, the VA announced a $1.5 million study into psychedelics for veterans. Some people celebrated that. I literally laughed. It infuriated me. It's $1.5 million. You know how much the federal government spends in a minute? $6 million. So it's 15 seconds of funding, and they spread it out over
It's baby
5
steps, okay?
years.
Baby steps.
I think they did this to shut guys like me up. Like, wow, we are looking into it. If you gave the No Fallen Heroes Foundation that 1.5 million bucks, I could clear half my list, maybe the entire list. I don't need a study. I've done the studies. And I keep, not that he reads my tweets, whenever the VA secretary tweets, I'm right underneath it going, Mr. Secretary, love what you're doing. Throw on some yoga pants and some boots and leave DC. Get out of that building and come on a retreat. Come hold space. Haven't heard a word yet. All those people in the VA need to get on an airplane and go to a healing retreat to either see we're lying
To
or
confirm
that
to
there's
confirm
something
one
here.
way or
It's
the other,
only
right?
either all either all of us are lying or we're not. And if we're not, we're losing 22 to 44 a day. This is a mass shooting. Could you imagine if 22 kids, not once a year, 22 kids were being shot every day in a school shooting? This country would freak the hell out. Even the pro gun nuts would be like, whoa, we need to do, yeah. But since it's us, it's the veteran community. Oh, geez. Thank you. Thanks for your service. Somebody should do something about that.
Well, people wring their hands and say that, what a tragedy that, if only somebody had done something. So we're glad that, you're out there doing stuff like this. There's so many other wonderful organizations. Dan and I, in our own small way, are trying to serve the veteran community by doing exactly what we did today, and that's discussing service, advocacy, things like that. So we'll kind of wind this down. We'll make sure we link the foundation of Fallen Heroes in the show notes.
Real quick, so my mission objective starting the foundation was to heal our heroes at home. Why are we going to Mexico, Costa Rica? We're starting to do that. Here's my updated mission objective.
Yeah.
I don't want to be doing this. My 3 to 5 year mission objective for the No Fallen Heroes Foundation is to go away. I shouldn't be doing this. The VA should be stepping up to fulfill their promise made to veterans. Joe Biden's administration took down the sign that was on the VA, the Abraham Lincoln quote about caring for the soldiers and their widow. And somebody got upset because, well, a female could serve now too. It was disgusting. The VA, this is the VA's job. We should not have nonprofits helping veterans. It's a sad state of affairs that we have, us have to step up and pick up the load for what the government promised. That's why every time I see an Elon, $1.5 million for a transgender opera in Serbia, I'm like, are you insane? Are you people absolutely insane? So the DC thing is, hey, make some stupid nonprofit as an NGO and then have the government fund that. And the senator's wife works for that NGO, and that swamp disgusting stuff.
Well, we're exposing. I say we. I mean, we're exposing it. We're seeing what most of us already knew was there. We're getting to actually see what's underneath the rocks now, and all the little creepy crawlies are running for the tall grass now, which is a good thing. So
hopefully they can shake some money loose out of all that graft to actually funnel it to people who are doing the work. I run my own financial company. I do public speaking. I got 90 day jobs. I don't take a dime from this foundation. My wife volunteers. We are all volunteer. All the money that comes in goes over the fence, because some of these, and I'm not naming names, but some of these really, really big foundations, you can go look at their public filings. The amount of money they pay their executives is obscene.
Believe me, I know. I used to donate to several different organizations, and I cut that off years ago, because it's
awful. It's absolutely awful.
It's a scam.
It's a business. They treat it like a business. I actually treat it like a nonprofit, man. I don't need the money. It's just devastating. So to anybody listening, 10, 20 bucks, whatever it is, it immediately goes over the fence to our veterans. I mean, we got, sadly, when I did Ibogaine 3 years ago, it was $3,500. I just checked their prices recently. It's $7,500.
Yep. Supply and demand.
These, I can't fault them. The retreat centers are for-profit entities. Ibogaine's popular, demand unbelievable. Thankfully, we use a great retreat center in Oregon called Experience Onward. For psilocybin, it's $2,500. And then I think Rising Ridge in Oklahoma, I think it was like $1,250 a guy, or maybe even $1,500. So it saddens me that Ibogaine, being such an incredibly powerful medicine, they've jacked up the prices. I mean, the Wolf of Wall Street guy. I went to a place called Beyond in Cancun, and I'm healed. I mean, so all the attention going to Ibogaine, all of these clinics have jacked up the price. And I hate talking like this, but I have to run it as a business owner. For the price of one vet going to do Ibogaine
Just
in
doubled,
Mexico, I can heal.
Yeah.
Exactly. I can heal 3 guys in the US. So I hate talking like that. I wish I could hook everybody up with an Ibogaine retreat, but I can't. So we'll pay whatever the $2,500 is in the Oregon retreat. If you want to go do Ibogaine, you got to eat the rest of it. I just can't. I can't afford it. I'd love someday for a high net worth somebody to come in and give us a big check, and I'd be like Oprah. You get Ibogaine, but it's sad to talk
knows?
like
maybe,
this.
Maybe there
goes back to the
listener.
Exactly, man. But maybe the VA will finally wake up and say, hey, man, Whiz, change of command, we got this, and I'll be done. I'll go retire and go fly my airplane and live in Colorado or something. But I don't want to be doing this.
Your lips to God's ears. So we're gonna wind this down. So Dan, you want to do our closeout?
Yeah. So real quick, one more time, if people that are listening or watching are interested in and you know they heard the treatment calling, where can they find you?
Yeah, go to nofallenheroes.com, and up on the top right, it says grant request, and then that'll get you into our system. I strongly recommend that you go to the No Fallen Heroes YouTube channel. Every retreat will debrief, a veteran, a first responder, or a family member. They give their debrief of the medicine and stuff like that. So there are a ton of assets and resources out there for you to get up to speed. A really great way to get up to speed is to sit watching Netflix tonight. 4 episodes, an hour each. You could binge watch in a night. It's called How to Change Your Mind. Investigative journalist Michael Pollan wrote a great book, How to Change Your Mind. It is. I strongly recommend you read the book, obviously. But if you want the cliff notes, it's 4 episodes, an hour each, called How to Change Your Mind on Netflix. And he was an investigative reporter. He wanted to look at this with a clean set of eyes and made this whole series. At the end, he ends up sitting with the medicine, and I don't want to blow it. So once you fill out a grant request form, start reading as much as you can, listening as much as you can. Listen to Joe Rogan talking about ibogaine. He had Governor Perry on recently. Governor Perry, 8-year Republican governor of Texas, ran for president. If I heard me advocate for psychedelics, I would beat me up. Now he's one of the most pro psychedelic guys.
That's actually kind of funny you bring Rick Perry up, because what sank his presidential aspirations were his debate performance that he flubbed because he was on heavy painkillers because of his back issues, right? So
Exactly. That's
right.
exactly right.
So
Yep.
all right, Dan.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll wind this down, but from being that Jersey kid and watching all the planes and everything, and watching Russian bombers skirt by the airspace, to getting furloughed from American Airlines and FedEx flights, and flying around Crawford Ranch in Texas after 9/11.
And having your
Which
former
you are not the
students
first
dress you
person.
down.
You are not the first person with that 9/11 story that we've talked to.
Yeah, agreed.
All the way to helping out veterans in desperate need. Would you do it all again? If you could go back, would you do it all again?
Fellas, I do it again 6 days a week and twice on Sunday. I've gotten to the point in my life where I can say this and I mean it. I'm grateful for my suffering. I can find gratitude in that 9/11 story, in the Chicago. In every low moment in my life, I can find some gratitude because it brought me to this moment.
Sanctification, right?
Yeah.
You got it. It brought me to this great moment, getting to talk and hang out with you guys. So I trust God. I trust the Holy Spirit. And I am thankful for the good as well as the bad.
Well, hey, brother, we can't thank you enough for coming on the show and spending a few hours with us today. And you've got a very interesting life, and you got a lot more ahead of you. So thank you so much for being a friend of the show, and we'll do everything we can to help you out.
You're awesome, guys. I appreciate the time. God bless you both.
So he had I think it was 15 years all told. He was in service for quite some time, but
yeah,
man, eventful, shall we say?
Well, that's often how it goes, right? And he fell victim to the Top Gun propaganda. As did I. I remember playing with my little jet airplanes. I'm not going to say how much older he is than we are, but let's just say I was a kid playing with fighter jets when Top Gun came out. And my sister got really into it and went and bought a Naval Academy sweatshirt. I'm just like, yeah, Navy, woo! And started rocking that around the house. And my poor father almost had a coronary over that. Well, looking back now, it seems so silly to me, but ugh.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that he fell. Well, he was victim of it, but he didn't necessarily fall for it because he wanted to do it before the movie came out.
Yeah.
And then the movie just came out at like the worst possible time for him because
Supply and
he was
demand.
planning on going into a, somewhat niche field, and then all of a sudden that market is flooded with people ahead of him.
With a bunch of wannabes. Yeah.
Yeah. That was funny though about how he was talking about some of the degrees that some of the pilots made, or that some of the pilots got in school, like forestry and stuff like that.
He was talking about how he had a BS degree and how he just like tap danced his way through college, and then he said the same exact degree that I have. I feel very attacked right now.
Well, you tap danced your way through college as well,
I
and
sure did.
and for the audience, I mean that literally. Roger actually did have a tap dancing.
It's true.
gig
I
that he
was a
paid
triple
for.
threat. It's true.
My-
Was it clogging or tap dance? Because there is a difference. I couldn't really tell you what it
well,
is other than the shoes are different. But
yeah, well, you certainly weren't wearing the wooden shoes, but you did have the tap heels and the spats going on. So,
mhm.
but he
Spats,
had,
I'm trying to bring it back, man.
yeah, he had some rough experiences, man. He had some rough ones. I mean, some very good ones as well. But going to your first, I think it was his first sea, or his first sea mission with
Yeah,
his air squadron, and having all that stuff go wrong. I think it was 8 different
that sounds
incidents
right. Yeah.
in a short
Or
period of
eight
time.
people. I don't know if it was 8 incidents, but it was eight people anyway.
Oh no, I think it was more than 8 people, because
Yeah, maybe you're
the
right.
one aircraft had multiple people, or a couple of the aircraft had multiple people on
Oh, the Prowler. Yeah.
them. Well, then also his buddy that like took off, and uh, it was him and another guy, and then they hit the condo. But man, that's brutal. During the break, I was talking to him about it, about their stand down that they had, and the stand down was only a week. Um, when something like that happens with that degree of loss of life, I would have thought that the stand down would have been considerably longer as they, check their processes and various investigations and whatnot. But he said that it was only a week because one of the reasons being that when they were talking to the mental health, behavioral health professionals at the time, that they were doing more harm than good by keeping all those pilots grounded, um, which I kind of get. But yeah, yeah.
Did he say how? I wanted to ask him this, but he was talking. But how long of a span of time it was from the first to the last
Um,
of the 8?
I believe it was over the course of just a few months.
Yeah, that's wild.
I
Oof.
believe. I can't remember specifically what he said, but yeah, I think it was over the course of just a few
Okay.
months. It's wow.
Well, trauma is trauma, and we talked about
Yeah.
that at the end. I mean, whether you get it on MSR Tampa in Iraq, or in the Korengal Valley, or standing on an aircraft carrier watching your best friend nosedive off the. I still can't believe the mechanical error they had.
Oh, dude, like he had just eaten with the guy, like sitting side by side, sharing a burger in the aircraft carrier mess hall or whatever. And then the guy's like, "Okay, well, I got to go do my flight," and that's it.
I mean, I guess there's some solace knowing that would have gone very quickly, but still, jeez,
Yeah.
I can't imagine. This is just me talking as an army guy. There's particularly at sea, there are things, submariners, surface folks as well, and then obviously the aviators who are zooming around. There's just something about not being on land that's just to my core terrifying. Like I would rather be on terra firma getting shot at than be out on at the bottom of the ocean in a submarine.
Oh,
Like,
oh,
period.
absolutely,
Oh,
absolutely.
like that's not even a contest. Anyway, so thank you to our sailors and our Coast Guardsmen, because geez,
I think I can handle being on a larger vessel, but a submarine, absolutely not. No, no, no,
oh.
no, 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 no.
Well, that's our unicorn. We want to get a Submariner on the show if anybody's interested.
Yes, yes. But
Okay.
then even when he was transitioning out of the service, or I should say, out of the active service, even then, some of his um, not great experiences did not end. I
That's some
mean,
leadership stuff right there, man.
you talk about like a lot of pilots get out and they continue to fly, obviously, because it's what they love, and they can make the big bucks flying for an airline. Or in his case, he started with FedEx, and he was miserable. And then
Yeah.
when he did actually get an opportunity to fly an air or fly on an airliner, uh, 9/11 happens. Can't do anything about it. And then I think it was JetBlue was the second time around.
Yeah.
A few years after 9/11, or I guess it would be a few years after the Iraq invasion. He got furloughed after his first flight.
Yeah.
Like JetBlue flew him to another city
I think
and laid him
American
off.
was the last. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like, dude.
Well, he's got a healthy outlook on
Yes.
these things, which kind of transitions to the last piece with the foundation.
Yeah.
So I'm personally, I'm still on the fence on what I think about the whole psychedelics.
Yeah.
I know that there is a lot of people in our community that are hardcore advocates for it. I'm still a little bit reluctant to dive into this. So I'm taking the most profile encouraged position you can, and that's I'm sitting right on the fence.
Yeah.
But that said, I'm glad that the people who have taken these modalities, these healing modalities, and had positive results, I mean, God bless them.
Yeah. Well, not very few treatments. Well, there is no one size fits all cure for pretty much anything, right?
Right.
What works for
If
some
it can be
people,
cured at all, by the way.
right? What works for some people is not going to work for others, and it doesn't matter whether it's psychedelics or pharmaceuticals. Um, I mean, the next time you go to the pharmacy to pick up a prescription for XYZ, whatever it is, in every single bag, or every time they give you the new prescription, it comes with that list of potential side effects and how to take the
A
medication,
booklet.
and it's all super tiny print, and it goes on for pages and pages. Those side effects are there for a reason, because they did not that medication that works for you did not work for a large amount of other people, so that the side effect had
Yeah.
to be listed. So
Well, the
if
possibilities are almost infinite just based off of people's genetic markers and
exactly
their lifestyle
exactly
and diet and all these things. So yeah, I
so
mean,
again,
it's a hedge.
what works for some people may not work for others. So I
Yeah.
think especially when it comes to healing, whether it's physical, emotional, or spiritual, you have to find the one that works for you, or works
Yeah.
best for you. And if that means trying a few different things till you find out what works, I totally get that. I totally get that.
Not to go off too much of a tangent here, but when he talked about the VA and how they should approve these medicines and these, we'll say, modalities, I do kind of think back to all the years that the marijuana lobby was pushing so hard to have it legalized, and then in some states anyway, it was finally legalized after decades of listening to the, I'm going to say this, lovingly, the stoners, pushed it so hard. And then, we'll say Colorado. And then now that it's legalized, like the quality has gone down and the prices have actually gone up, and
it's chemically engineered and
it's
all this stuff.
engineered. And then people, and if you talk to some marijuana users, they will tell you like it was actually better when it was illegal, I guess is what I'm getting at. Because, once Uncle Sam gets involved.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to make this an episode about weed. I'm just saying, I hope that the psychedelic, I hope the psychedelics, if they indeed are the dog that catches the car and they get exactly what they want, I hope they don't regret it.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. But he is helping veterans that need it, and he has a 100% success rate. So, I mean, that says something. So
Murphy's Law number 12: if it's stupid but works, it isn't stupid.
Yeah, but I mean, and if it helps those veterans that do the trip, then I mean, if it helps them to stay alive, I'm absolutely for it. And I mean, if it helps them stay alive and heal their pain, then I mean, go with God. God bless. I mean, good.
Yeah, and for everybody listening, we had a pretty good discussion even after we stopped recording about what Dan and I are talking about now. So just really great stuff. We ask you to reach out to Whiz. He's a really smart guy. He has a great foundation, and he's communicative. So if you need him, he's there. So anything else on Whiz, not his given name?
Nope. Thank you, Matt, for coming on with us.
Maybe we can get him on Tracer Burnout After Dark to give the real story on, and see if he can top Digger.
I would like to hear some more about his inside the Beltway talks about why he doesn't go anymore. I can guess as to why he doesn't.
We'll do whiskey and cigars on that one. Maybe we'll bring Digger on, and they can have.
He doesn't drink anymore with good reason. So
I'm talking about for me.
Oh, okay. But no, he had a pretty crazy arc, and I'm glad he's come out the other side okay, and I'm glad he's helping veterans. So awesome.
One last thing, Wiz, this is for you. I would rather drive down Route Irish circa 2007 than try to land an aircraft on an aircraft carrier in the dark. So God bless you, man.
All right. Before we get on to the free fire questions,
yes.
or question, we have some new reviews to read. So I will kick us off.
Let's hear it.
We have one from the Jimbo Simmons, or is that Dot Simmons? The Jimbo Dot Simmons. The Jimbo? I don't know. Whatever. Highly recommend, 5 stars. I really enjoy listening to all the different perspectives and experiences from all the service members about their time in the service and their branches. The hosts of the show do an outstanding job of facilitating discussion and translating military jargon so anyone can understand and enjoy the show. This is a great show to feel connected, catch up with old friends, and even learn what service could be like if you are interested in serving in the future. I recommend Tracer Burnout to all my battle buddies that are serving, past, present, or future. So, awesome. Thanks, Jimbo.
And the Jimbo, if you want to take Dan on an ayahuasca retreat down in South America, I will help facilitate that. Just let me know how it goes.
Not really my kind of thing. Not really my kind of thing. But
you don't like South America, Dan? Okay.
The food would be amazing, but yeah. I would have way too much that I would want to do that I wouldn't want to be muddled about.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, I got the next one. This one is from rad_78. I don't know if that's a hat tip to 1978, 1878, or
1778, 1678, 15's
Great
a lot.
podcast, 5 stars. Roger, ooh, that's me. And crew never disappoint. They go above and beyond to highlight a diverse group of retired servicemen and women. This is a must listen to podcast, and in addition to your daily go to downloads. Kudos to Tracer Burnout for working hard to provide some awesome content to the people. Thank you, Rad78.
So
We do work hard.
So apparently, Roger is the only person of note here, and the crew.
No, you're part of the crew.
The crew is me. So congratulations, you're the headline act. You're the lead singer of this band.
Am I suffering from what they call LSD, lead singer disease?
You're Simon. I'm Garfunkel.
Do I get to be the Axl Rose of this? when Slash, a notorious alcoholic, goes to him and says, "Dude, you were drinking way too much," that's when you know you've got a problem.
Okay. One more.
That's enough Guns N' Roses references for the day. Okay.
This is from Carano CR. Carano? If we butchered these, we're sorry. Or at least I'm sorry. Roger is smug and doesn't care.
I need to keep tabs on the crew here. Okay.
Veteran interviews with a twist. 5 stars. I heard about these guys from a veteran friend. I am not much into podcasts, but I decided to listen while doing housework. These guys and their guests had me laughing so hard. The different points of view are so interesting. I especially like the burning question videos they put out. Do yourself a favor and tune in and follow. You won't regret it.
No regrets.
By burning questions, I think Free Fire is what Carano CR is talking, or perhaps some of the YouTube stuff that we put out.
That could be true.
Or perhaps some of the social media stuff that Roger minus the crew puts out. I don't know. But thank you very much for all the reviews. They are fantastic. Keep them coming. All the high ratings and reviews help push us up the podcast ladder.
Yes, please.
And it helps. Primarily, it helps more people notice the show or have it recommended to them when they're searching for new stuff. So it is always
thanks for all the support.
Yeah. And I guess it's time to move to the burning questions.
The burning questions
/ Free Fire area.
Not to be confused with the Burning Man, which I'll see you there. I'll have my beads on and be half naked, of course. Go ahead.
Okay. We talked to Whiz about the difficulty of the Top Gun Nintendo game. And it's actually not the first time that's been brought up on this show.
I'm still holding a grudge, yes. Damn you, Konami.
And I gave up on that game after, I don't know, a very short time playing it because it was insanely difficult to land the plane.
These kids these days don't know about Nintendo.
But it got me thinking about difficult games that we have played. And we will relegate this to specifically video games. So
video games.
We're not talking about playing Mahjong or Monopoly with your one friend that flips out and flips the board. Or
if you don't know who that friend is, then it's probably you.
Yeah. So specifically video games. What is the most difficult video game you have ever played? Not just the game of your childhood that infuriated you the most.
Most difficult. I mean, I think most of these are going to go most of these will be Nintendo, just because the interface for the original, the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment Center system, was so simple, and the gameplay was very difficult. That the combination of those two things. So I mean, just because we're talking about, Top Gun certainly in the top 5. To be sure, that seems to be a hot topic today. There was a Sega Genesis game that was called The Three Vikings.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
It was kind of a strategy game in that you had these three Vikings who were trying to escape from the bad situation, and each of the Vikings had a unique skill
Yeah.
that they could employ. So I remember this. There was three. So the first one was a big guy who had a big shield and could
Yep.
block anything,
Yep.
and he could put it above his head, or he could have it down, in the defensive position. So that gave him also the capability to be able to coast or glide is probably a better word.
Yeah.
So he could drop and glide, but he could not jump. So he was static in that sense. And then there was a second one who was really fast and could jump. And then there was a third one who had a bow and arrow and a sword. And again, this guy was also static. He could not jump, but he could, move laterally, of course, but he couldn't jump. And so you had all these complex situations and puzzles that you had to get yourself out of in order to. The point of the game was to escape the lair of this bad guy. And so I just remember being infinitely frustrated at that game, mostly because I was probably high school age when I was playing it, and I wasn't nearly as clever as I thought I was. That's up there. And then back to the Nintendo, the original NES. I gotta say that we did Top Gun already. Bionic Commando was an incredibly difficult game too. Well, I did too, but I never came even remotely close to beating it. Like I would plateau at the second or third level and just be done.
Wow, that's sad.
Okay, well, I didn't say I was skilled, but so if I were to say the top three, I would go with those, and any golf game. Any golf game, all of the above. How about you, man?
The first game that I remember throwing a controller was, I think it was for the Super Nintendo, and it was Prince of Persia.
I remember that.
And it was, the old side-scrolling game, and you had to watch out for pits with spikes and snakes, and you were running and catching cliffs and stuff like that. And the franchise has developed because it's still around today. They even made a movie, I think.
They're very sophisticated now, yeah.
But the one for the Super Nintendo would infuriate me, because you'd be running through this hallway and the floor would start wobbling. So you knew that the floor was going to collapse. And you would try to time it right so that the floor would start wobbling and you could run a couple more steps before jumping to safety. It wouldn't work. So and this is back in the day when you didn't have.
You'd get a hamstring cramp.
Right. And this is back in a time before save points and health bars and stuff like that. So you went all the way back to the beginning, and you had to start all over again.
Video games are easy now because our generation are the ones that made them because of our traumatic childhood.
Yes. So that is the first game that ever made me throw a controller. I remember that. I certainly agree with Top Gun being an insanely difficult, ridiculous game. But at that point, that I didn't have the anger issues that I did later. And I would just say, nope, I'm done with this. I'm going to go outside and play or whatever.
I'm walking away.
But an addendum to this, when I was a drill sergeant, so this would have been in 2007, 2008, a drill buddy of mine had an Xbox, like an original Xbox, and he had it modified to where it had all the old Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega games, like all the old school games were on this Xbox, and so you were playing these old games with an Xbox controller. And so I had 24-hour duty one night, and so I pulled this thing out and I was messing around on it. I did not finish a single game of anything because playing the Mega Man games, which I remember loving as a kid,
those are
so
so hard.
ridiculously hard. Playing
Metroid.
any game that I picked, I could not get very far in because I was in my 20s, and I had already become so used to having save points and checkpoints and multiple lives and stuff.
You've gotten soft in.
Dude, what was it? Shinobi, the ninja game.
Yeah,
Oh,
Shinobi was tough.
I loved that game as a kid. Ninja Gaiden, yeah.
Double Dragon was
Double Dragon. That's what I was just thinking of. Yeah, man.
Oh, dude, all of the old Nintendo games were hard.
Yes.
Castlevania was hard.
Yeah. Yep.
These dang kids these days need to get off my lawn.
Growing up pampered with their save spots, their health bars.
So to summarize, my top spot goes to Top Gun. Do you second that?
No, I'm still giving my top spot to Prince of Persia because it is the first, not the last. It is the first one that made me throw a.
We have some diversity. So we have Iran versus the United States. Excellent. Made by Japanese engineers. Perfect.
There we go.
Okay, well, let's wind this one down. Everybody, thanks for listening, watching. Please like, share, subscribe the show. Tell a friend. You are our advertising arm. We're all over the social media except the Chinese spyware that is known as TikTok. So please,
American spyware, Roger, is all over though.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm totally fine with American-made spyware. Facebook, Instagram. So give us a like, share, subscribe over there. We appreciate everybody. And remember, your service matters.